Chapter 1298. Jiang Wang was so infuriated by Ying Guan that he nearly wanted to inform the Chu Kingdom's imperial government. Back when the Chu Kingdom's border general was assassinated by Doorless Hell, the Chu Kingdom had issued a warrant, vowing to wipe out Doorless Hell. After realizing that the warrant was not issued, it silently revoked it. Doorless Hell was an assassin organization after all. They only did business and did not deliberately target anyone. However, they still openly appeared in the Chu Kingdom. It was as though they were jumping around the Chu Kingdom's face repeatedly. Once the Chu Kingdom's imperial government learned that Doorless Hell was in Jade Luster City, it was imaginable how intense their reaction would be. Of course, it was only a thought. With Ying Guan protecting him, it was impossible to capture Yang Xuanzi. Jiang Wang continued on his journey. After leaving the Chu Kingdom and entering the Zheng Kingdom, he heard a piece of news. Due to the Xiang Kingdom's seizure of the Su Kingdom's caravan for no reason, the two countries had conflict. After several failed negotiations, the Su Kingdom brazenly sent out troops. Now, the armies of the Xiang and Su Kingdoms were stationed in Xingyue Plains in a standoff. The big move that Cheng Gengsheng mentioned had already arrived. During this period of time, there were many more people in the Zheng Kingdom. Most of them were small factions that had been in Xingyue Plains. The two countries chose Xingyue Plains as the battlefield for the war. These grassroots groups, which had no connection to any side, immediately scattered like a fish. No matter how long they had been operating here, how long they had lived here, or how deep their feelings were, when the city gates were on fire, the fish in the moat would die if they did not escape. How could the cruelty of the world end here? The Xiang and Su kingdoms that had cleared Xingyue Plains with an army were only two chess pieces in the hands of the hegemonic countries, despite their awe-inspiring appearances. The seizure of the caravan and the punitive expedition for the people were just the will of the Jing and Qi kingdoms. Even if the two countries had no intention of going to war, nor could they find any benefits in the war, they had no choice but to fight. The battle between the Xiang and Su kingdoms in Xingyue Plains could be seen as the vanguard battle between the Jing and Qi kingdoms. From his experience of circling around the plains, Jiang Wang believed that the battle with Jing Mu was inevitable. Before he left the plains, the Iron Stupa, which was ranked 6th among the world's 10 cavalry armies, had already headed for Liyuan City. The Shang Kingdom had no means of taking back the border city by itself. Under such circumstances, in Xingyue Plain, a war between the Xiang and Su countries could still erupt. This was enough to prove Jing country's conceit. Jing country wasn't willing to start a war with the two hegemons at the same time, but at the same time, they weren't willing to let Qi take away too many benefits. Hence, they wanted to test Qi's quality in Xingyue Yuan. Of course, judging from the current situation, Jing State's main force would not come to Xingyue Plain. This was also the reason why Jiang Wang regarded the war on Xingyue Plain as a test. The outcome of this battle would directly determine the attitude of the two hegemonic nations. If Su country, which was supported by Qi, was destroyed in one battle, Jing country could also fight on two fronts. On the other hand, if it was easy to defeat Elephant State, then Qi could take advantage of the situation and invade the central region. However, all of this had nothing to do with him. The state of Zheng was in the north of Xingyue Plain, while the Xiankong Temple was in the south. Xiang country and Su country were on opposite sides. After Jiang Wang left the state of Zheng, he went around Xingyue Plain. Because Su country was preparing for war, he didn't go through Su country. Instead, he went around the eastern border of Su country and went to the Xiankong Temple alone. This route was already very close to the state of Qi. Although he didn't enter Su country's territory, he could imagine that the atmosphere in Su country wasn't relaxed. This war might be a test for Qi Jing, but for Su country and Xiang country, it was a war with all their might. Their country was in danger of being destroyed. Along the way, he occasionally met some people from Su country. In short, they went to Qi under various guises. Because Jiang Wang met them, they all looked very gloomy. In such an atmosphere, Jiang Wang finally arrived at the Xiankong Temple. But how could he contact Jingli? He was in a dilemma. If he went to the temple in a linen cloak, no one would pay attention to him. However, he was currently missing, so he couldn't reveal his identity. Jiang Wang wandered around the Xiankong temple for a long time. Finally, he found a clever little boy on the street. He stopped him and was about to speak. The little boy turned around and ran away. Jiang Wang was stunned. He immediately realized that he didn't look like a good person with his cloak, linen cloak, and dragon-headed staff. In the Xiankong temple's territory, there were only ordinary people. No one should know him. He took off his cloak, put away his dragon-headed staff, and looked for his target again. When he saw a handsome little boy, he tried to speak in a gentle tone. "Little boy, do me a favor. How about it?" He took out a piece of silver and shook it in his hand. "Run an errand, and this silver is yours." The little boy put his palms together and bowed to him. "Please tell me what you want." "I don't want the silver." "Ah." Jiang Wang was stunned. "Why?" The little boy looked very serious. "I want to do good deeds every day." No wonder it was the Xiankong Temple's territory, the eastern holy land of Buddhism. Looking at the little boy's clear eyes, Jiang Wang felt ashamed. As an adult who was about to turn 20, he had almost adapted to the so-called reality that considered problems in terms of interests. But he forgot that life was not about rewards. "I'm too tacky. I almost polluted your peaceful heart." Jiang Wang put his palms together and bowed back, saying gently, "Then can you help me go to the gate of the Xiankong Temple and find a monk whose Buddhist name is Jingli? Just tell him that I'm waiting for him here. If he asks me who you are, what should I say?" "What shall I say?" asked the little boy. Jiang Wang said, "Just tell him that I'm the one who invited him to dinner on August 9th. The little boy nodded, turned around, and trotted away. As the eastern holy land of Buddhism, the territory of the Xiankong Temple was not smaller than that of countries like China and Su. However, the place Jiang Wang asked for was not far from the gate of the outer mountain of the Xiankong Temple. About 2 hours later, probably mainly because the reception monk asked for instructions, the bald and shiny, cleansing gift flew over with the little boy who delivered the message in his arms. "Little junior brother," he shouted in surprise from afar. "You came to see me?" Jiang Wang quickly made a shushing gesture. When he flew closer, the little boy in Jing Li's arms was a little surprised. "Big brother, have you been waiting here all this time? Why didn't you find a place to sit?" "Didn't we agree to wait here?" Jiang Wang smiled and handed over a paper bag. "You've worked hard running errands. I bought some pastries and fruits for you to eat." The little boy waved his hand and was about to refuse. Jiang Wang added, "It's not a reward. It's a treat for a friend. You ran errands for me, and I treated you to food. This is called reciprocity." The little boy looked back at Jing Li. After all, Jing Li was the holy monk of the Xiankong Temple, so he trusted him more. Jing Li's face was solemn. He smiled and said, "This is fate. There's no need to reject it." The little boy took the paper bag and said to Jiang Wang, "Thank you, big brother." Jiang Wang returned the gesture and watched the little boy leave with light steps while holding the paper bag. He felt comfortable in his heart. Sometimes, children were like a mirror. When you looked at this mirror, you could easily see the changes in yourself. Woo-woo. Suddenly, the sound of crying came from the side. Jiang Wang turned his head. Jing Li, who looked like a holy monk a moment ago, was now sobbing uncontrollably. "Little Sure, junior brother, we don't have a master now." Jiang Wang turned pale with fright. His heart ached, and he felt his nose turn sour. "What happened to Master Kuju?" Tears streamed down Jing Li's face. Master, he left." "How'd he leave?" Jiang Wang was shocked, angry, sad, and guilty. "Was it those thieves from Jing Kingdom?" He left the mountain." Jing Li sobbed. Chapter 1299. The delicate little monk's tears fell like rain. Beside him, Jiang Wang was speechless for a long time. Jing Li was depressed for a long time. He forced a smile in front of others and looked solemn in front of his followers. He finally met his junior brother. In the end, he couldn't help but feel sad. As for Jiang Wang, he was just thinking to be able to grow up to this day while taking such deep breaths. He really had a lot of luck. Jing Li cried for a long time. He cried very sadly. but he realized that his junior brother was expressionless. He couldn't help but pout. "Junior brother, why aren't you sad?" Jiang Wang said faintly. "You cried and told me a piece of news that was delayed by half a month. It's hard for me to be sad." In order to save him, the old monk Kuju didn't hesitate to leave the mountain. This indeed moved him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought of contacting Kuju as soon as he escaped. But that was already in August. "Has it already been so long?" Jingli sobbed. "But I'm still very sad," Jiang Wang asked. "What's the saddest thing for you?" Jingli pouted again. "I don't have a master anymore." Master Kuju left the mountain. "You don't recognize him anymore?" Jiang Wang asked. "I do." Jingli blinked his eyes. His tears washed his eyes until they were extremely clear. There were still remnants of tears on his eyelashes. He really looked like a pitiful little monk. Jiang Wang sighed. "But don't you still have a master?" Jingli frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, his brows relaxed and he smiled. "Yes." Jiang Wang was very tired, but when he saw Jingli smile, he felt very happy for some reason. "Do you have a way to contact your master?" he asked. "I need to talk to him about something." "Yes, there's a secret way to contact him." Jingli nodded vigorously. Then he grabbed Jiang Wang's hand. "Junior brother, come with me." At this moment, he seemed to have the self-awareness of a senior brother. He flew in front and cleared the way with Jianfeng. Jiang Wang wanted to say, "Can you stop calling me junior brother?" But he knew that it was useless. He simply didn't say anything and followed him. The two of them quickly flew to a barren hill. There was only a dilapidated temple on the hill. Landing on a mountaintop, Jing Li said happily, "Junior brother, we're home." Home. This word was indeed very touching. Looking at the dilapidated temple, standing proudly in the wind, Jiang Wang didn't know what to say. "This is Sanbao Mountain." As Jing Li spoke, he pulled Jiang Wang into the dilapidated temple. "Come with me." Jiang Wang looked left and right, but he really couldn't see where the treasure of this small hill was. 3 treasures? There wasn't even a single treasure. Thinking of this, Jiang Wang froze for a moment. Suddenly, he remembered that Kuju, Jingli, and himself made up 3 people. Could it be that these 3 treasures? He bared his teeth and felt a chill run down his spine. The mountain was truly very small. She had only taken a few glances at it before she was pulled into the dilapidated temple by Jingli. Even a small and run-down temple was divided into 2 halls. Jingli brought him around the place and introduced him to the place in high spirits. A wooden Buddha with a blurry face was worshipped in the front hall. There was no incense to speak of. There was only a wooden bed in the back hall. Other than that, there was nothing else. "Come sit." Jingli patted the wooden bed and said enthusiastically. There's no need," Jiang Wang said. "Let's contact Master Kuju first. He's outside, it's very hard." Jingli had always cared for his master. Hearing this, he immediately stood up and shushed Jiang Wang. He said very softly, "Don't make any noise." Jiang Wang expressed his doubts with his eyes. Jingli said in a very sneaky voice, "Has left Xiankong Temple. We need to contact him secretly." "You're really sneaky enough." Jiang Wang was extremely speechless. "You're wearing a shiny bald head. You swaggered over to find me and loudly called me junior brother. Where can you sneak off to? If I hadn't stopped you back then, I'm afraid everyone in Xiankong Temple would have known that I was here." Jingli didn't care too much. After instructing his junior brother, he lifted the bedboard. On the back of the bedboard, there was a circle of intricate formation patterns inscribed. Once it was displayed, it swayed like a dragon and an elephant. Jingli became solemn. In an instant, he looked solemn. He formed a seal with his right hand, and it glowed. He directly imprinted it. In the middle of the circle of formation patterns, the light was like water, and circles of ripples appeared. Is this the so-called secret method of contact? Is it under the bedboard? Jiang Wang realized that he was no longer surprised when facing Jingli. In a sense, hiding behind the bedboard of this dilapidated temple on a bald mountain was indeed considered secretive. Jiang Wang was still silently finding excuses for Jingli when a voice rang out. "What's wrong?" It was Kuju's voice. The light on the bedboard had already gathered into a round mirror. The yellow-faced old monk's face was reflected in it. He seemed to be sitting on a mountain peak. There was a tree beside him. He looked very smug and said loudly, "I'm looking for your junior brother. He's very busy." After a pause, he asked, "After I left the mountain gate, those old bald donkeys didn't make things difficult for you, right?" Due to the angle, he didn't notice Jiang Wang beside him. He only sized up his beloved disciple, Jingli. However, Jiang Wang could see him. He could see the unconcealable tiredness between his brows. "Oh no," Jingli said. "There were a few little bald donkeys." "How dare you?" The yellow-faced old monk in the round mirror glared. "How did you do it?" Jingli grinned and said, "I've already put a cloth bag over them and hit them with a stick." "Good. You have the root of wisdom," Kuju praised loudly. "As expected of my good disciple." Jingli smiled at first. Then he pursed his lips. "But didn't you not want me anymore?" "Silly child, what nonsense are you talking about?" The yellow-faced old monk glared at him. "Let me ask you, in the entire Xiankong temple, who is the wisest and most virtuous?" Jingli said hesitantly. "Master, be more confident. Take away the questioning tone." The yellow-faced old monk's spittle flew everywhere. "You're just stating the truth." Jingli had already completely forgotten about his junior brother. He could only obediently say, "Oh." The yellow-faced old monk let out a long sigh. With a worried expression, he said, "Master is so dazzling. If you don't leave, how will you compete for the abbot position in the future? How can you compare to Master? You can't compare to him from head to toe. Do you understand?" Jingli shook his head. "I don't really understand." "Silly child, Master is doing this for you. In order to leave the position of the next abbot for you, I have no choice but to leave the mountain gate. Among my disciples, Master loves you the most. You must remember Master's good deeds. Do you understand? When you become the abbot in the future, you must show your filial piety. Things like Sarira's, steal, concoct a few for me." The old monk was deceiving the little monk too much. Jiang Wang really couldn't listen anymore. The most important thing was this old and young baldy were chatting so enthusiastically. When would they talk about him? Thus, he took the initiative to walk forward. "Can I have a few words?" The yellow-faced old monk in the round mirror was stunned. He glanced at Jiang Wang through the treasure light round mirror. He blinked his eyes and glanced at Jiang Wang. Suddenly, he grinned, revealing his yellow teeth that were still stained with vegetable leaves. Chapter 1300. Son, duh. Jiang Wang changed the way he addressed him several times. In the end, he could only say, "How are you?" He had once traveled thousands of miles to intercept Zhuang Gaoxian in the sky above Changhe and save his life. This time, he didn't hesitate to leave Xiankong Temple and chase after Zhao Xianyang under the pressure of Jinghua to save him from danger. Although he couldn't catch up, if it weren't for Ku Ju's pursuit, Zhao Xianyang wouldn't have chosen to go to the ancient devil's cave, and Jiang Wang wouldn't have been able to save himself. This was how a teacher treated his disciple in ancient times. This friendship was too deep. He really didn't know how to repay it. Moreover, what could he, a mere inner mansion cultivator, do to such a worldly enlightened master? "What can I do?" "Of course, it's very good." Ku Ju chuckled. "Good disciple, how did you escape?" "A friend saved me," Jiang Wang said. "However, I'm still negotiating with Jinghua under the guise of being missing. So please don't reveal that I've escaped. I was afraid that you would be worried. So I came to Xiankong Temple to inform you through Master Jingli." Ku Ju suddenly glared. "Evil disciple, you also know that I would be worried? Why didn't you come to see me when you left Qi?" Jiang Wang was speechless. He only said, "I'll never forget your kindness. I really don't know how to repay it." In the round mirror, Ku Ju waved his hand. "Wait." Jiang Wang didn't understand. "Wait until I return to Xiankong Temple to shave your head." Jiang Wang was stunned. Ku Ju pointed his halberd at him. "Good, you heartless person. You're hesitating." "That," Jiang Wang whispered. "Didn't you leave the sect?" Ku Ju rolled his eyes. "Can't I just return? Could it be like this?" Jiang Wang was confused. Could a top sect like Xiankong Temple really leave and return as if it was child's play? It didn't sound very reliable. Monk Jingli was also stunned, but the reason he was stunned was different. Master, didn't you say that you would leave the monastery and leave the abbot position to me? Why are you returning now? Oh, Jingli, Ku Ju lamented. Your Buddha heart has been shaken. You are no longer pure. You actually don't want your master because of a mere abbot position. I. Jingli lowered his head in shame. What about me? Ku Ju's face hardened, and he said seriously, the Buddha's heart is covered in dust and should be diligently wiped away. Stand in the corner as punishment. Jingli obediently walked to the corner of the wall and stood there, feeling aggrieved. Jiang Wang was silent for a while. Then he said, Master, although it's not very good to ask this, I really don't want to hide or pretend in front of you. Actually, I've always wanted to ask you, why are you so good to me? What kind of shameful question is this? Ku Ju reprimanded. It's only right for a master to take care of his disciple. You are my disciple. How can I not care about you? That's right, that's right. Jingli hurriedly agreed, expressing his loyalty to his master in exchange for forgiveness. Ku Ju angrily rebuked him. Don't talk too much when you're standing. Jingli's face fell, but he still tightly shut his mouth. Although he had been reprimanded, Jiang Wang still continued to ask, Then I want to ask, why are you so determined to take me in as your disciple? It wasn't that he doubted Ku Ju's motives. If he really didn't trust Ku Ju, he wouldn't have asked this question. He just really wanted to know the truth. Everything had a reason. Of course, people could treat another person well without considering the pros and cons. Of course, they could give their all without holding anything back. But where did this feeling come from? He knew that his attitude towards Ku Ju wasn't good. At first, he was suspicious and on guard. Later, he resisted and avoided him. Later on, although he was moved and close to him, he still persisted on his own path and refused to enter Buddhism. Why did Ku Ju treat him so well from the beginning? Of course, it's to find a peerless Tianjiao and brag in front of those bald donkeys. Oh no, Ku Ju put on an impassioned expression. Of course, it's to find a fated person to inherit my mantle and save the world with me. Save the world. You are that peerless Tianjiao. This was too ridiculous. The topic of saving the world was too grand, so it floated in the air. But if Ku Ju wasn't willing to tell the real reason, Jiang Wang couldn't force him to ask. He could only bow deeply to this yellow-faced old monk through the round mirror. Please forgive me. It's not that Jiang Wang doesn't know what's good for him. It's just that Jiang Wang has a blood feud that I can't let go of. He was rejected again. On the other side of the round mirror, Ku Ju was angry. You just said that you don't know how to repay me. Now I'm teaching you, and you don't want to listen? He was so angry that he started scolding, You heartless little bastard. Jiang Wang didn't look down or escape. He looked at this yellow-faced old monk very seriously and confessed his heart. Your kindness to Jiang Wang can't be described in words. Jiang Wang can repay you in any way you want, even if I die. But I can't follow you into Buddhism. Jiang Wang escaped from his ghost-like hometown, not to escape to the outside world, not to live an ignoble life, not to give up everything, but to be able to embrace everything one day, to go back. Sooner or later, I will go back with my sword, no matter how long the road is, no matter how many people try to stop me, no matter how much blood stains this sword. Every time I close my eyes, I can see the ghosts of my hometown calling me. Jiang Wang's eyes reddened. Master Ku Ju, the ghosts of hundreds of thousands of people are on my shoulders. How can I ignore everything? Ku Ju could obviously feel his sincerity, so he became even more angry. Jingli, he shouted. Monk Jingli didn't say anything. Ku Ju flew into a rage on the other side of the round mirror. Good, evil disciple. One by one, you're rebelling, aren't you? Master called you, but you didn't even respond. Jingli said pitifully, You told me not to speak. You still dare to talk back? Ku Ju was so angry that he couldn't restrain his anger. If they weren't so far apart, he probably would have already attacked. Then what do you want to do? Jingli said with a pout. Beat him. Ku Ju pointed at Jiang Wang. Beat him for me. Teach this stubborn, evil disciple a good lesson. No need. Jingli shrunk his neck. Little junior brother is also very pitiful. I feel sad when I hear it. Kuju didn't care much and said rudely, "Are you not listening to Master's words?" Jingli pursed his lips. "I'm listening. Then why are you still in a daze?" Kuju commanded. "Beat him up." Jingli saluted Jiangwang. "Little junior brother, I'm sorry for offending you." Jiangwang didn't try to escape. He even closed his eyes and said with a bitter smile, "If this can appease Master's anger, Jiangwang is willing to take this beating. You're still trying to trick me. Do you think I'm stupid?" Kuju's anger couldn't be appeased. "Jingli, hurry up and beat him up." "Okay, Master. But if I beat him up, I won't be able to maintain the round light mirror." As Jingli said this, he made a hand seal and erased the round light mirror, cutting off the communication. "Use the merciful, compassionate, and big slap that I taught you." Kuju's urging voice stopped abruptly. Jingli turned around aggressively and faced Jiangwang. He had always been the most obedient. Most of the people in Xian Kong Temple felt that Kuju was out of tune. He was the only one who worshipped Kuju like a god and treated Kuju's nonsense as the golden rule. At this moment, he raised his right hand high, but he only lightly placed it on Jiangwang's forehead, which meant that he had already beaten him. "Don't be sad," he said softly. Chapter 1301. Jiangwang had already left for a long time. In the ruined temple of Sanbao Mountain, Monk Jingli sat cross-legged quietly. Monks were monks, but if they didn't have a home to begin with, where would they go out? Ancient Buddha lamps, Shioja avoided the world. But if they weren't in the world, what could they avoid? For as long as he could remember, he didn't know his family. He had never seen his parents. It was Kuju who had raised him. Some little novice monks would cry when they missed their parents. He didn't know what he was thinking. In the so-called chaotic world, he didn't have an existence he could miss. He lived among the sounds of chanting, rolled among the Buddhist scriptures, and grew up among the sounds of bells. Sometimes he would think, what was home? Why did he have to go out? Why was it hard to part with? Shifu said, when they were together, it was home. Then he understood he was hard to part with. That he was a little monk seeking home in Buddhism. His world was very simple, and this place was his home. Shifu said Jiangwang was little shitty. Then he had another family member. This was such a happy matter. So every time he saw Jiangwang, he was very happy. He was very happy and hoped that little shitty would be as happy as him. But today, he learned that little shitty wasn't happy. So little shitty had shouldered that kind of weight and walked step by step to where he was today. He liked to sleep. He didn't know the feeling of never being able to sleep. He also didn't know that when he closed his eyes, he would feel the terror of blood and fire. At this moment, he sat alone on the wooden bed. When he thought of little shitty, he felt very sad. Jingli, 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 Jing. The thunderous voice sounded as if it was taking one's life. It fell into the room before stopping. Kuju, who was so thin he was skin and bones, smashed in front of Jingli like a sharp stone. He glanced at the pitiful little monk. His tone unconsciously softened, but it was also like he was roaring. "Why didn't you respond when I called you?" "Shu." Jingli stood and obediently bowed. "I didn't have time to respond, and you—" Forget it, forget it." Kuju waved his hand and said, "Contact your Shifu. I have something to see him about." His voice was like a war drum, causing the room to buzz. "Ah." Jingli stood there in a daze and said innocently, "I can't contact him." The next moment, his ear was pulled up. Kubing said, "You've even learned how to lie, haven't you? If I hadn't eavesdropped on your conversation just now, I would have believed you." Guanli ignored the pain in his ear and said angrily, "Martial uncle, how can you eavesdrop on our conversation? Cut the crap." Bitter illness knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, but he forced himself to change the topic. He maintained the dignity of an elder, and his voice seemed to have exploded in Jingli's ears. "Hurry up and contact your master." "No." Guanli stubbornly resisted. Ku Bing glared at him and raised his hand to slap him. He quickly shrank his neck back. All right. Master often said that a good monk does not fight when the odds are against him. Jingli had always been obedient. Of course, he would carry out this philosophy. Tell your disciple Jingshun to wait. As he flipped the bedboard, he grumbled unwillingly. Can't we still contact each other in the temple? Bitter Disease said impatiently. So much nonsense? Isn't it because your master is ignoring us? Is that so? Jingli suddenly became happy. He felt that his master had helped him vent his anger. Like before, he formed a seal and poured his power into the formation patterns, summoning the round light mirror. Although the main formation patterns of the round light mirror were carved on the back of the bedboard, the power that supported its operation involved the entire temple. Of course, the most important part was still the power that Kuju had left behind. Not long after, Kuju appeared in the round light mirror. He said, "Have you been fighting for so long? It's fine if you casually beat him up, but if you really hurt your junior brother, you'll compensate." Bitter Disease, you old bald donkey? His gaze swept over Ku Bing, and he immediately wanted to cut off the round light mirror. But Ku Bing had already shouted, "Senior Brother Abbot has something to say to you." Kuju rolled his eyes. Senior Brother Abbot's telepathy secret technique is unparalleled in the world. Is there a need for a sickly person like you to send a message? Ku Bing suppressed his anger and said, "Didn't you cut off telepathy?" "Oh, so it's like that." Ku Bing did not feel embarrassed at being exposed at all. He said indifferently, "Then why are you looking for me? Is the Dragon Subduing Institute unable to continue?" "I already said that Senior Brother is looking for you." "Then hurry up and say it. Why are you looking for me?" Kuju shouted back. "Do you think it's easy for my disciple to maintain the round light mirror? Senior Brother wants you to come back." Ku Bing quickly said. "What?" Kuju asked. Ku Bing slowed down and said word by word, "Senior Brother wants you to come back." "Louder!" Kuju shouted. "Come back if you want. In any case, I've already passed on the message." Ku Bing was annoyed and turned to leave. Kuju hurriedly gave Jingli a look. The master and disciple's thoughts were connected, and Jingli cried out, "Master, please come back. I miss you so much." "Good disciple, don't cry, don't cry." Kuju hurriedly comforted him. Fine. For your sake, I'll reluctantly agree." Ku Bing, who had already walked to the door, stopped and said impatiently, "I heard you, but I can't go back now. I'll talk about it later. I still have to cover for my beloved disciple." Kuju added, "You're panting because you're fat, aren't you? You don't behave properly every day." "Do you really think that Xian Kong Temple is begging?" Ku Bing turned around angrily, but the round light mirror had already dissipated. Kuju had no intention of listening to what he had to say. He wanted to roar. He wanted to roar. He wanted to hit someone. His anger was stuck in his heart, and he had no way to vent it. In the end, he looked at Jing Li and could not vent his anger on a junior. He flung his sleeves and stepped out of the door, feeling indignant. It's really a mess. There are no rules. How can this be forgiven? Jing Li watched Ku Bing walk far away before he patted his chest to ease his nervousness. As for what rules Ku Bing talked about and what not to be forgiven, he actually had some doubts. Leaving the mountain gate was a very serious matter. Even he knew that it was impossible to come and go as he pleased. How could his master be so willful? Why would his master take the initiative to persuade him to come back? But as quick-witted as he was, he quickly found the answer. His master was the most respected monk in the entire Xian Kong Temple. He was the best choice for the next abbot. How could he not forgive him? If something happened to his master, would Xian Kong Temple not want an abbot in the future? Thinking of this, Jing Li hurriedly spat. I've sinned, I've sinned. I'm not cursing his master." He put his palms together and muttered, "Shioli Shioli, Maha Shioli, Shioli Shioli, Sapaha." After he finished reciting the mantra, he placed the wooden bed in satisfaction and lay down on it. Today was too tiring. It was better to sleep. Chapter 1302. After leaving the Xiankong Temple, Jiang Wang suddenly felt lost, as if he didn't know where to go in this vast world. The central region, the eastern region, the northern region, Even the entire world was in turmoil because of the actions of the three overlords. Heroes from all over the world were involved, but none of this seemed to have anything to do with him. Speaking of which, the current chaotic situation seemed to have started from the fact that he was convicted of the crime of colluding with demons. He was probably the source of the disaster. However, he had to hide his identity for the time being, so he became a bystander. The waves were surging and sweeping everything away, but he walked on the far shore in the name of being missing. However, for Jiang Wang, confusion was always short-lived. The most important thing for him was to find a peaceful place to cultivate. In the end, he chose Zhao Kingdom. Zhao Kingdom was located in the east of the Xiankong Temple and southwest of Qi. It was one of the 9 sunrise kingdoms that had once been famous. It was a kingdom that had inherited the legacy of old Yang. Of course, the so-called 9 sunrise kingdoms was now a joke. Since last year, Yang Kingdom, which had inherited most of old Yang's legacy and was the most powerful kingdom, had been declining. After it was finally destroyed in a war, only Zhao, Chang, and Su kingdoms were left. The kingdoms in the eastern region used to fight for the title of Old Yang Zhengsheng, but now they were very eager to cut ties with Old Yang. Because of the changes in time, the overlord of the eastern region today was called Qi. If one looked back at history, it was not difficult to find that 2 of the 9 sunrise kingdoms were destroyed by Qi himself. The first was Yang, and the second was Ming. There was no need to talk about the Yang kingdom. The famous Zhu He's alliance originated from the Ming kingdom and eventually expanded to the entire region. The Qi kingdom's Qing token had the right to travel across the entire eastern region. Now, the 9 sunrise kingdoms, which only had 3 small kingdoms left, were inevitably trembling in fear of Qi. Among the 3 kingdoms, Su Kingdom was still in a standoff with Xian Kingdom because of Qi's will. They could start a war at any time. It could be said that they were willing to sacrifice their lives and sacrifice their loyalty to Qi. Therefore, when Jiang Wang came to Zhao country, it was no surprise that he was surrounded by the same sounds and the same clothes were everywhere. Jiang Wang, whose face was covered by a cloak and linen clothes, actually received a 50% discount when he paid for the room because of his authentic Linzi accent. The shopkeeper's face was full of smiles as he treated them as guests of honor. Jiang Wang no longer cared about worldly gold and silver. What he saw from this incident was Zhao State's complete obedience to Qi. Back in the day, no matter how much the Yang Kingdom admired the Qi dynasty, they would not hesitate to make money. Hu Yu, a mere village constable, dared to steal resources from the Zhanggenjia. Later on, Jia City's city lord Shi Jing was blinded by greed and sent troops to attack Qingyang town. And now, he was displaying such an ordinary identity in the kingdom of Zhao. The person he met was also an ordinary citizen of the kingdom of Zhao. This was the most convincing. There was nothing to sigh about. Jiang Wang locked the door and began his evening cultivation, transporting Dao essence, combing the heaven and earth isolated island, exploring the inner mansion, familiarizing himself with Dao techniques. He went through all the steps in an orderly manner. The pleasant surprise came unexpectedly. In the exploration of the 5th inner mansion, he found an extremely useful secret treasure. It was called Perish the God, and its effect was to increase the attack power of the spirit by 10%. There was no need to wait. For Jiang Wang, this was the best secret treasure. He decisively took it. This was the first time he found a secret treasure so quickly since the Taoist vein soared into the sea of 5 mansions and explored the 5 inner mansions. It could be said that his luck had turned. Jiang Wang, who took the 5th secret treasure, did not stop there. Instead, he calmly continued his evening cultivation. Although the secret treasure was good, in the end, all the secret treasures were based on the cultivator's own strength. Only then could they have a more dazzling performance. If it was an ordinary inner mansion cultivator, he would not even be able to touch the door of spirit attack. The effect of Perish the God was almost 0. He was very satisfied with Perish the God, but the difference of 1 or 2 secret treasures would not affect his overall combat power too much. Now that he had taken 5 supernatural powers in the 5 mansions, all 5 secret treasures had appeared, and all 5 instantaneous Taoist techniques had been engraved. He had almost reached the end of the inner mansion realm. The reason why he used the word almost was because there was still some room for further exploration. At this level, there was still room for improvement, but there was not much time left. Jiang Wang could feel his strength and was confident to face any opponent. Of course, he could not go beyond the outer mansion. After familiarizing himself with the newly acquired 5 senses Hell and Fury Flame 20 times, Jiang Wang adjusted his body, returned his Taoist energy, relaxed his muscles, and let himself return to his peak state. Then, he entered the great illusionary land. Today was the 15th of September, the day of the Great Illusionary Land's Blessed Land Challenge. As the owner of the 47th Tiger Creek Mountain, he would be challenged by the 48th owner of the Blessed Land, Zhang Long Mountain. Jiang Wang had never wanted to miss the opportunity to fight with the strong in the Blessed Land Challenge. However, he was unlucky. He would always encounter some things that would interrupt him. Just like the 15th of August, he had spent the last Blessed Land Challenge in the ancient Devil's Cave. He could not even contact the Great Illusionary Land. In the Blessed Land, a line of Taoist words appeared on the shadow of the sundial. The 48th owner of the Blessed Land, Zhang Long Mountain, issued a challenge. Do you accept? Since he was already here, Jiang Wang decisively agreed. The Sword Discourse Arena whistled into the Milky Way and collided with another Sword Discourse Arena, merging into one. Jiang Wang was already used to this scene. He only focused on sizing up his opponent, but he found that it was an acquaintance. To be precise, he knew the other party, and he believed that the other party also knew him in the real world. However, they had not interacted before. This person wore a high hat and a wide belt. He had the air of an ancient Confucian scholar. His eyes were deep, his expression was proper, and he carried a big bow on his shoulder. It was Chun Si Wu, who had represented the Song Kingdom in the unrestricted field of the Yellow River Gathering. He actually appeared in the Great Illusionary Land with his real name and appearance. It was indeed rare for him to appear. Jiang Wang usually did not speak during the Blessed Land Challenge, or rather, he did not have many opportunities to speak. Today, he could not help but say, "I didn't expect Mr. Chun to be here without any concealment, just like in the real world." Chen Siwu did not seem surprised that he was recognized, or rather, he had the confidence that there is no one in the world who does not know me. At this moment, he took down the big bow with a flip of his hand and said lightly, "A real man does not change his name or surname. He does not change his appearance in life and will not change his expression in death. I am who I am. What I need to hide." Jiang Wang, who had changed his appearance and surname, laughed dryly. "Mr. Chun, please." Chen Siwu had been to the Riverview platform. In other words, he must have seen the battle where he won the championship. Jiang Wang did not want to expose his identity in front of Chen Siwu. Therefore, he held back the idea of going all out and decided to only attack at the level of spirit this time. He was not afraid of being recognized by others for his newly acquired Fury Flame, Hell of 5 senses, and God-perishing secret treasure. As soon as the word please was said, the big bowstring was pulled. Jiang Wang's spirit moved as well. He opened the God-perishing secret treasure at the first moment and summoned the Hell of 5 senses. The Hell of 5 senses had the Hell of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. The Hell of eye fell and could not see anything. The Hell of ear fell and could not hear anything. The Hell of nose fell and could not smell anything. The Hell of tongue fell and could not taste anything. The Hell of body fell and did not know where he was or who this person was. He was at the mercy of others. Chapter 1303. Jiang Wangshao summoned such a 5 senses hell, displaying the advantage of his spirit, and instantly became known to everyone. However, as soon as the 5 senses hell landed, he saw a sacred and glorious ancient palace. It descended from an unknown place. It was immeasurably tall and wide. It ran through history and experienced the vicissitudes of life. It was majestic, heavy, and inviolable. Jiang Wang came to a realization. This was Chun Si Wu's temple of accumulation. It was projected from the primordial spirit sea. The prison of the five senses, hell landed on this ancient sacred palace. It was like using a few stalks of grass to tie up a fierce tiger. It was an extravagant wish. It was powerless and laughable. There was not even a ripple. The five senses hell fell, and the five senses hell was empty. Then, Jiang Wang saw in the divine soul level that there was a sharp arrow flying towards him. He remembered this arrow because he was facing it. This arrow was shot by Chun Si Wu outside his body. It was imprinted on the divine soul level at the same time. Jiang Wang naturally knew that he was no match for Chun Si Wu. However, he still had to put in the greatest effort in the divine soul level to feel the strength of Tianjiao. He gathered the remaining strength of his divine soul and lifted the single rider array diagram. His goal was not Chun Si Wu's heavenly palace or the temple of accumulation, but to pull the arrow into the single rider array diagram. Using an offensive divine soul array diagram for defense was just to delay the battle and let him experience more of Tianjiao's methods in a safe environment. However, he only heard whoosh. This half of the single rider array diagram was directly penetrated. The arrow flew over without any hindrance and hit the heart of Jiang Wang's divine soul. He suddenly opened his eyes. The arrow outside his body had also been nailed into his heart. Then whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another 3 arrows seemed to fly from the sky and nailed between his eyebrows and his shoulders. It was the 5 shots Shun Lian. Jiang Wang's figure collapsed and disappeared from the sword discourse arena. Chen Sishu furrowed his brows and started with 5 shots. Of course, he was going to face his opponent in this blessed land challenge with a very proper attitude. Every time he came up for a challenge, he knew that the great illusionary realm was also filled with experts. However, the opponent just now seemed to be a little too weak. He had only come into contact with his opponent's spiritual power. This level of spiritual power was still some distance away from the threshold of the immortal arrival realm. How did this person occupy the 47th blessed land? Was he showing his true strength now? Or was he injured? Or had his realm been broken? Let's not talk about Chun Si Wu's doubts. Jiang Wang lost the Blessed Land Challenge once again and fell to Zhonglong Mountain, which was ranked 48th among the Blessed Lands. This was to be expected, so there was nothing much to say. Only the appearance of Chun Si Wu had allowed Jiang Wang to have some understanding of the level of power in the Great Illusionary Land's Blessed Land Challenge. Because he was beaten up every time, he really didn't know how strong his opponents were. Chun Si Wu, who could participate in the Yellow River Gathering with no restrictions under the age of 30 and obtain a spot in the main competition, was one of the few Tianjiao in the world. He occupied the 48th place in the Blessed Land ranking. From this, one could roughly know what kind of monsters ranked higher were. Chun Si Wu's strength should be inferior to Zhao Xuanyang's. When facing Jiang Wang's spiritual attack, Zhao Xuanyang's response was obviously more relaxed and natural. Although today's Jiang Wang was stronger than yesterday, or perhaps Chun Si Wu was more cautious when facing opponents in the Blessed Land Challenge, Jiang Wang felt that Zhao Xianyang was more dominant. Therefore, he couldn't help but wonder if he had met Zhao Xianyang when he fell from the True Cave Ruins Blessed Land to Zhonglong Mountain. Did he participate in the Great Illusionary Land? Did he disguise his name and hide his methods? Or did he participate in the few challenges he missed? As for the other possibility that his ranking was higher than the True Cave Ruins, Jiang Wang didn't believe it. Especially after painstakingly studying the flame flower-burning city. He recognized Zhuo Guanglia's talent and strength. When he died, he already possessed strength that should be looked up to even in the immortal descent realm. After ending the Blessed Land Challenge, Jiang Wang thought for a while and wrote a letter to Zhuo Guangshu, telling him that he was safe and asking him to keep it a secret for the time being. Now that he was back in the Eastern Domain and considered safe, he could care about these things. As for Swordsman Ning, whom he often contacted in the Great Illusionary Land, there was nothing much to say. They only had a friendship of swordsmanship and didn't trust each other. After the negotiations with Qi Jing ended, he was still willing to exchange pointers with swordsman Ning often. Swordsman Ning was really an excellent opponent in swordsmanship and an outstanding genius in swordsmanship. That was all. In the end, Yin He flew out and briefly explained his situation before flying to Yun Nation. Because Yin He wasn't safe enough, his words were deliberately vague. But fellow Taoist, you should be able to understand. He continued to cultivate in the following days. He tasted some of Zhao Nation's delicacies, but unfortunately, there were very few local specialties. The most popular food here was Qi Nation's delicacies. Even the food was worshipped by him. The source of all this was Yin Ping, the former prime minister of Qi Nation, who created a spring breeze and rain, just like the peaceful destruction of Yang Nation. When he was in Qi Nation, because Yin Ping had already retired and lived in seclusion in Bay County, he didn't care much about national affairs. People didn't feel much. They knew that he was powerful, but they didn't know how powerful he was. But in these countries that were influenced by Yin Ping, they could deeply understand how terrifying Yin Ping, the former prime minister of Qi, was. Under his plan, Qi Nation was a friend of time. The longer it was, the more stable its position in the Eastern Domain would be. It was no wonder that every time someone criticized Jiang Romo, they would inevitably say, "What happened when the former prime minister was in power?" Brother Yin Fu was really rich and powerful, making people envious. After feeling envious, they continued to cultivate. Although Jiang Wang had attained the Heaven's Palace and was already worthy of being the #1 inner palace in the modern world, he still cultivated diligently and continued to advance to a stronger position. There should be a limit to the Heaven's Palace, but that limit, who should define it? If the predecessors could define it, why couldn't the people of today? The present must be victorious over the past. After spending a full 7 days in cultivation, it was September 23rd, 3919th year of the Taoist calendar. On this day, Jiang Wang had just finished his evening class when his bed collapsed. Without any warning, without any energy fluctuations, it fell apart very naturally. This made it even more strange. Of course, Jiang Wang wouldn't fall, but he had a bad feeling about it, because when he jumped up from his bed and landed on the floor also collapsed. The guest room he was staying in was on the 2nd floor. The wooden planks broke and fell directly into the room on the 1st floor. It startled a pair of lovebirds on the bed, and they screamed loudly. Jiang Wang casually raised his hand and lifted the fallen wooden planks, tables, and chairs, everything in a room on the 2nd floor, and placed them in a corner of the room. Then, he raised his hand and lowered the curtain to cover the lovebirds. Then he walked out and put his hand on the door. The door, which had been in disrepair for a long time, also collapsed with a loud bang. Chapter 1304. Jiang Wang's hand, which was about to push open the door, paused in midair. One accident after another would definitely not be an accident. Who was targeting him? How did they find out about him? Jiang Wang asked himself if he had been in Zhao country for the past few days. He had never done anything that would expose his identity. There should be no possibility of being discovered during this period of time. Finding him should be based on previous clues. But if the person secretly manipulating these things already knew about his whereabouts, why did they wait until today to act? Moreover, what was the basis of these numerous accidents? Why couldn't he detect any fluctuation of Tao elemental energy? As these questions surfaced in his mind, Jiang Wang's hand, which had paused in midair, had already grasped a sheathed longsword. The wooden sheath of the Shenlong sword was simple and unadorned, but the sharpness of the Sauvignon longing had already penetrated the sheath. With the longsword in hand, Jiang Wang strode out of the door. No matter who it was, he had to face them. Moreover, in this situation where accidents frequently occurred, he did not want to implicate the innocent. Outside the door was a corridor. Jiang Wang quickly turned around. He suspected that if he continued to stay here, the entire inn would collapse. But at this moment, a small knife suddenly appeared in front of him. The knife's shape was very strange, and the way it appeared was also very peculiar. Jiang Wang did not detect any fluctuation of elemental energy, nor did he detect the way it appeared, where it came from, how it appeared, or how it broke through space. In short, when he caught sight of it, the knife had already appeared in front of him. It gave off a mysterious aura, but it only pointed the handle at him, as if it had no intention of attacking. Jiang Wang looked at it coldly and vigilantly. He saw the tip of the knife move forward and land on a corridor pillar not far in front of him. It seemed to be pinched by an invisible hand, and as a result, wood shavings swirled in the air. The knife actually started to carve words. From top to bottom, it wrote, "I took the amulet on the streets of Linzi. Today I pay the bill. You Beidou." Seeing this line of words, it was not difficult to guess the source of this series of abnormalities. Come to think of it, even though the bed had collapsed and the door had collapsed today, there was indeed no accident that could really endanger his life. Rather than saying that it was a plot, it was more like some kind of prank. However, when Jiang Wang saw this line of words, his first thought was, didn't I pay for a knife? Back then, everyone had agreed to give me a protective talisman for one blade of money, which was why I wanted it. After the money and goods were settled, why was there still an additional charge? Ubeidu seemed to know what Jiang Wang was thinking. Right in front of him, the small engraving knife finished its last stroke. Suddenly, the cold light faded and it fell to the ground, turning back into a knife coin. It flipped in the air and landed in Jiang Wang's hand. It was the one that Jiang Wang had paid. No wonder he felt that the shape of this knife was so strange. It was clearly a mutation of a knife coin. From this, Jiang Wang roughly knew how Ubeidu came to find him. He had personally given a knife coin, so it was inevitable that there would be some connection between them. If a physiognomist of Ubeidu's level wanted to do something or capture some traces, he would be completely unaware. Although he recognized the knife coin, Jiang Wang decisively put his hands behind his back and avoided it. The protective talisman that Ubeidu had given him was already gone. How could he accept this knife coin? He could return the knife coin, but he could not return the protective talisman. Jiang Wang avoided it with his hands behind his back, but this knife coin persevered. It circled in the air like a wild bee wave and a butterfly landing on the stamen of a flower, insisting on landing in his hand. The blue cloud mark appeared and disappeared. Jiang Wang gracefully turned around and shook it off. The knife coin chased after him again. Jiang Wang fled again. One person and one knife coin, turning back and forth in this long and narrow corridor, fleeting and ephemeral. Jiang Wang still did not know what the protective talisman that Ubeidu had sold had helped him block. Although according to Cheng Gongsheng, it seemed that something had indeed happened. It was probably a curse, a kind of attack, so he should be grateful. But then again, hadn't he already paid a knife coin? How could Ubeidu's business be easy to meddle in? His strength was far from enough, and this person was often involved in some strange things. Jiang Wang considered himself weak and thin, so he did not want to get involved. Who knew what Ubeidu wanted to collect from him? This knife coin had been chasing after him for a long time, but it finally seemed to understand something. It flew to the front of the corridor pillar and continued to carve. Just treat it as doing me a favor. How about it? He did not mention paying the bill. Jiang Wang did not care whether the other party could see or hear him. He decisively shook his head and said, "If you have something to say, don't say it. I can't help you." This knife coin paused, as if it was shocked by his straightforwardness. It quickly continued to carve. "I'll pay. This is not about money." Jiang Wang softened his tone and said apologetically, "I'm sorry. It's really not convenient for me right now. You should find someone else." The knife coin's carving was very heavy, 10 primordial stones. Jiang Wang said without confidence, "I'm not short of money." The knife coin hovered in the air for a while and said again, "I'll teach you the top outer building level Taoist techniques. It's fate that we meet." Jiang Wang had already taken a step forward with a smile on his face. "If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to tell me. If I can help, I won't refuse." The knife coin drew in the air and erased the carvings on the corridor pillar. It stopped talking to Jiang Wang and flew out on its own. Jiang Wang tightened his cloak and followed behind in a low profile. When he passed by the inn manager, who heard the commotion and hurried over, he casually handed over a gold ingot. "Sorry for the trouble. This is the compensation for the damaged items in the inn." The manager took the gold ingot in a daze. Before he could say anything, the linen-cloaked man had already walked far away. The man's footsteps looked calm, but his speed was extremely fast, and there was a kind of natural and unrestrained immortal aura. He only left behind words with an authentic Lindsay accent, which made people feel like they were listening to heavenly music. He bit the gold ingot in his hand and confirmed that it was of good quality. He couldn't help but sigh, as expected of someone from Lindsay. In a room on the top floor that Jiang Wang had smashed open for no reason, two lovebirds were talking on the bed. The curtain covered the frame bed, making them look like they were hiding in a fortress. What was he doing just now? The woman glanced outside through the gap in the curtain. "I don't know." The man was still in shock. The woman asked again, "Was he peeking at us just now?" Then, in a moment of excitement, he fell down. "I don't know." The man was dispirited. The woman whispered, "He seems to be a transcendent master." "Probably." The man hung his head dejectedly. "It seems that although this person is transcendent, he can't be free from vulgarity." Sigh. The man sighed. "Who was he talking to just now?" The woman asked. "I don't think there was anyone." The man was in a daze. Was he trying to hide his awkwardness? Who knows? The man's heart was as still as water. "You seem to be frightened," the woman said. The man forced a smile. "Haha, I'm not scared." The woman glanced at him. "It's really broken." The man didn't say anything. "Should we report it to the authorities?" The woman asked again. "He's already gone." The man reacted. "Put on your clothes first." Thank you for supporting the original. Wanding will hold a lucky draw in Chidian's book review and comment section to thank the original readers. Currently, the prizes are the 3 copies of Journey to the West that I published this year. They will be given out after you sign them. The other prizes are probably some red hearts. Currently, the order is 9,400. Wanding, charge. Chapter 1305. Jiang Wang didn't know how others were making things up about him. Fortunately, he didn't expose his identity, so he wasn't afraid of being made up. The money flew in front of him at a moderate speed. The passers-by all turned a blind eye to it. Or rather, they couldn't see it at all. Jiang Wang could feel the weight of their gazes. He was sure that no passers-by's gaze fell on the money. However, he didn't detect any signs of obstruction or concealment from the money. How did he do it? With Jiang Wang's current strength, he couldn't see through it at all. Ubeidu was known as half a lifetime divination. He really had an unpredictable ability. The money left the inn and led the way with a clear goal. It chose the shortest route and led Jiang Wang out of the city. Then it suddenly accelerated. Jiang Wang followed closely behind and sped up as well. This flight was all the way out of Zhao country. The money was still heading north. Jiang Wang had just flown over from the north. After a few days of peaceful cultivation, he had to fly back again. He suddenly had a bad feeling. What did Ubeidu do? Why'd he have to go so far? He inexplicably felt that he was at a disadvantage. However, since he had already agreed, he couldn't go back on his words. Xiang country and Su country seemed to have ended their wrangling. After confirming that the problem couldn't be solved through negotiation, the small-scale fighting and collisions gradually increased in scale, according to the communication with Chenggung Sheng in the Great Illusionary Land. This time, Li Longchuan, Wang Yiwu, and the others all went to Xingyue Plain to participate in the war with Xiang Su as the skin and Jing Qi as the bones. Qi's main force didn't move. The high-level military forces were all reserved. However, the young Tianjiao filled up the army of Su country, and Jing country did the same. From this point of view, although this war was a test between the two countries, it couldn't be taken lightly. Both Qi and Jing country probably tacitly agreed that this war on Xingyue Plain would be the battlefield for the younger generation of both sides. It could be considered an early confrontation between the high-level military forces of both sides. Since Jing country chose to fight with Qi in Xingyue Plain before continuing the discussion, and the war had already begun, Jiang Wang's missing bargaining chip wasn't so important anymore. The outcome of this battle was more important. Cheng Sheng also asked Jiang Wang if he wanted to participate in this battle to earn merits. At that time, Jiang Wang refused and devoted himself to cultivation. At this moment, they were flying north from the Zhao nation. Along the way, they saw a steady flow of resources from the Qi nation to the Su nation. They could clearly smell the scent of war. He didn't know why, but he was suddenly eager to try. Jing Country's Mirror World platform accused him of being in cahoots with the devil, causing the world to be evil and his reputation to be tarnished. He also ordered Zhao Xinyang to kill him, putting him in a life-or-death situation. He couldn't deal with those old monsters, but the battle in Xingyue Plain was the main battlefield for the young people. Among his peers, who was he afraid of? In Xingyue Yuan, testing the quality of Jing Country's young people would be a pleasant thing. However, the knife coin flying in front of him broke his reverie. Keep flying north from the Su nation to the Qi nation, to the Rong nation, to the north, and finally to the Broken Soul Gorge. Standing in front of this gorge with no end in sight and no top in sight, looking at the steep cliffs and listening to the whimpering sound of the wind, a feeling of confusion immediately arose. This gorge was like a natural moat. He didn't know which deity had created it. It was really a good place to kill people and bury their bones. The knife coin was spinning in front of him, as if it was urging him. Jiang Wang clenched the sword in his hand and walked inside. The sun was rising outside, but the gorge was still gloomy. Looking up at the sky, there was only a thin line left. Jiang Wang inexplicably thought that if someone lived in this Broken Soul Gorge all their life, would they also think that there was only a thin line in the sky? Sometimes, what limited one's thoughts was precisely one's knowledge. The wind passed through the gorge, and the faint sound was like the crying of ghosts. The end of the Broken Soul Gorge was said to be connected to endless quicksand. Judging from the length of the gorge, Jiang Wang felt that it could go through the grassland. And, at the extreme north of the Jing Nation and the Mu Nation, the end of the desolate border was said to be connected to the Wanjia graveyard. He didn't know if there was any connection between them. After walking for a while, Jiang Wang suddenly heard a clanging sound. It was the sound of some kind of metal colliding with stone. He held the sword and walked forward cautiously. Suddenly, he looked up and saw a person in the sky, holding a thick-backed woodcutter with both hands. He was falling from a high place against the cliff. In the process of falling, he kept hacking the cliff with the woodcutter. Jiang Wang could feel the explosive power surging in the person's body with every hack. Almost every hack was done with all his strength. The sound of the knife hitting the cliff was also intense. It was the source of the clanging sound. What was surprising was that the person was working so hard, but there wasn't even a trace of the knife mark left on the cliff. Jiang Wang was very sure that the cliffs on both sides of the Broken Soul Gorge weren't protected by any special power. At least, there wasn't any from where he saw it. In other words, the person who was hacking the cliff with the woodcutter was controlling his power in an almost perfect way. He kept hacking and colliding, but the cliff wasn't damaged at all. How exquisite! Probably because he felt someone approaching. The sound of hacking stopped abruptly. The person who was falling down the cliff looked in Jiang Wang's direction. It was a young man with a childish face but a determined gaze. Jiang Wang, of course, remembered Lin Xian, who was amazing at the Yellow River Conference. The Lin Xian who said, "Rong Nation is indeed small, but it is very big in my heart." He was actually practicing in the Broken Soul Gorge, where few people went. Jiang Wang. It was Lin Xian who spoke first. Jiang Wang felt a little strange. He was dressed in a cloak and hemp clothes, and his face wasn't even exposed. How could Lin Xian recognize him? "How did you know it was me?" he asked. Lin Xian held his woodcutter and floated down. He landed about 30 steps in front of Jiang Wang. "I recognize your sword," he said, "although I didn't have the chance to fight with you. I have observed you for a long time." The young Tianjiao from Rong Nation had observed the young Tianjiao from Qi Nation for a long time on the river viewing platform. There was a natural sense of sorrow in his words. Rong Nation was weak, and Qi Nation was strong. However, from the beginning, He had regarded Tianjiao, Qi nation, as his opponent. He wanted to improve himself and make a name for his nation. He wanted to save Rome nation's reputation. He wanted to fight for hope. However, he couldn't even pass the test of Xian nation's sympathy. He could even recognize the Sauvignon Blanc in its scabbard. He had indeed observed him for a long time. So, Jiang Wang said, "So you want to fight with me today?" Lin Xian was silent for a moment. He said, "I am not your opponent." For this young man, this was probably too difficult to say. After all, when he was first trained, he imagined that Tianjiao, Qi nation's inner mansion realm, would be his opponent. However, Qi Jiao was too strong and had gone too far. Even now, when he thought about the ultimate sword on the river viewing platform, he still felt that it was unattainable. Just like the Broken Soul Gorge, there was no end to it. Woo-woo. The wind in the Broken Soul Gorge sounded like it was crying. Chapter 1306. Jiang Wang didn't say anything in the wind blowing through the gorge. Since the other party didn't want to fight, he wouldn't make trouble for him. "Do you want to go in?" "I'll make way for you," Lin Xian said and stepped to the side. "Thank you." Jiang Wang nodded slightly to show his respect. He walked past Lin Xian and went in with his sword. Lin Xian was a little surprised. He held the hatchet tightly and didn't know where to go. The reason he took the initiative to step aside and show weakness was naturally to avoid conflict. But in his heart, he was actually prepared that Jiang Wang would not let him go. There was no other reason. Jiang Wang was clearly missing right now. Qi State was using this as an excuse to occupy the righteous position and fiercely denounce Jing State. Xingyue Plain was the next battlefield. Jiang Wang, on the other hand, was still alive and kicking, even in the eastern domain. If Jiang Wang appeared in the Broken Soul Gorge, would he kill him? Killing Lin Xian wouldn't bring any unbearable consequences to Qi's Tianjiao. Killing Rong's Tianjiao and suppressing Rong was in line with Qi's interests. But Jiang Wang didn't do anything. Not only did he not attack, he didn't even humiliate or look down on him. He only thanked him with a proper attitude. Lin Xian didn't know what to do. "All right." Jiang Wang paused after walking a few steps. "My current situation is a secret. I hope you can keep it a secret. Although it's not a big deal to let Jingwen know, it's better to have less trouble." "Okay." Lin Xian nodded. "I believe you." Jiang Wang smiled and didn't look back. Lin Xian looked at the back of the man who walked into the gorge alone and lowered his eyes. It was exactly because he was so powerful that he didn't show any arrogance and impatience. The atmosphere of a great country was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. He often came to the Broken Soul Gorge to practice his hatchet. Every time he chopped 9,999 times, he had to make sure that every chop penetrated the back of the hatchet and hit the cliff without damaging it. He only finished half of it today, but he didn't want to continue. Carrying his chopping knife, he walked out dejectedly, because he realized once again that he might never be able to cut down the tree that he had once regarded as his goal. The woodcutter cannot cut the wood, and the fisherman cannot catch the fish. Nothing. Jiang Wang walked in alone. He wasn't surprised that Lin Xian would train in the soul-breaking gorge. The Shin Kingdom was the power closest to the Broken Soul Gorge. Of course, the East King Valley, the Shin Nation, and the Chu Nation were not too far away from the Broken Soul Gorge. It was just that there were no resources to speak of in this place, so there had never been any major disputes. Because it was so steep, very few people came here. This place was indeed a good place for cultivation. His respect for Lin Xian was not superficial. No matter what his position was, Lin Xian's battle with Tan Zhe on the river viewing platform was worthy of respect. What he was more concerned about was that Lin Xian didn't seem to see Dao Qian, who was leading the way. Jiang Wang's curiosity was piqued by this seemingly ordinary piece of money. What kind of power did you Beidou put into this knife coin? After about 2 hours deep into the Broken Soul Gorge, the view before him suddenly opened up. The long and narrow Broken Soul Gorge was now open. What appeared before him was a huge open space with jagged rocks of strange shapes. It extended very far to the left and right, But because of the tall cliffs on both sides, he could still clearly see that it was contained in this gorge. If this was the end of the Broken Soul Gorge, then the entire Broken Soul Gorge was like a bottle with a big belly, and Jiang Wang was in this big belly. But if he flew a little higher and looked into the distance, he could see that the end of this huge open space was still constantly shrinking, extending into the unknown distance. The long and narrow Broken Soul Gorge was only temporarily fat here, but would eventually slim back down. Jiang Wang returned his gaze back to the front. There were no trees here, no flowers, and even the most tenacious weeds were nowhere to be seen. Those strangely shaped rocks gave people a very abrupt and strange feeling that was hard to describe. Dao Qian finally changed direction and led the way to the right. It seemed that the help Beidou wanted to help was in this strange rock valley. Jiang Wang flew at a low altitude, trying not to make any noise. He did not know what was here and did not know what Beidou wanted him to do. He maintained a cautious and alert state to face the unknown. If it was not for the goodwill that Beidou showed on that protective talisman, he would have turned and left long ago. Jiang Wang and Dao Qian passed through the forest of strange rocks. For some reason, the scene of the strange rocks in front of him made him think of the pagoda forest of Xiankong Temple. He vaguely had a kind of fantasy that these strange stones might be some kind of senior Xiuzhe, but this thought was quickly erased. In terms of the information he sensed, these rocks were really just rocks. Then he felt that this forest of strange rocks, was it some kind of formation, a naturally formed maze, or was it set up by someone? Jiang Wang was shocked. Too many distracting thoughts. Ever since he entered this strange rock valley, he had thought too much. Being so distracted was not something that he should have when he was in a state of alert. Once he was alert, a golden light shone from the fifth inner mansion and shone in all directions. In an instant, he put away all his distracting thoughts, and his mind was clear. With the red heart divine ability, guarding all external evil could not invade. The golden light, with the meaning of immortality, shone all over the fifth inner mansion. As Jiang Wang stared at Dao Qian and continued forward, the misguided seed in the second inner mansion suddenly jumped. If someone was looking at Jiang Wang at this moment, they would see that the young Xiuzhe's clear eyes were as calm as deep water, and suddenly there was a golden ripple. Under the ripple, at the bottom of the still water, there were black and white yin-yang fishes swimming. At this moment, Jiang Wang saw a line between reality and illusion on Dao Qian, connecting Dao Qian and himself in a way that pierced through time and space. Presumably, this was the reason why Dao Qian could find him from so far away, and why only he could see it. Before this, Jiang Wang could not see any trace of it, but now, by chance in this strange rock valley with the red heart divine ability, he saw its true nature. What kind of line was this? It was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. He could see it, but he could not see it clearly. It seemed to be constantly changing, appearing and disappearing. For the time being, Jiang Wang could not think of any power he could use to affect it. His Dao essence and soul power could not affect it at all. Perhaps the divine ability, light, of the misguided divine ability could do it? Right now, he still needed it to lead the way, but he could not study it in detail. However, Jiang Wang had already developed an extremely strong interest in this line, and he secretly remembered it in his heart. As for Jiang Wang himself, ever since he plucked the red heart divine ability, he had been exploring the effects of the red heart divine ability. However, he had never heard of this divine ability before, and there was no one around to guide him. He could only walk and grope. However, at this moment, he realized that the red heart divine ability could still control the misguided path. Apart from the state of the 5 inner mansions being illuminated at the same time, the red heart divine ability could also be related to the red heart divine ability alone. Thinking about it carefully, it made sense. With the red heart divine ability in hand, he would not go astray. As the last divine ability seed plucked from the 5 inner mansions, the red heart divine ability that emitted the immortal golden light seemed to have more possibilities. After dispersing the divine ability light, The line could no longer be seen. However, Jiang Wang no longer had any distracting thoughts. He followed the money and continued to pass through the stone forest until he heard the sound of flowing water. After circling around a tall and strange rock, the flowing water appeared in front of him. His eyes instantly turned red. It was a blood-colored stream. Jiang Wang sniffed lightly. No, it was not a blood-colored stream. It was blood. Chapter 1307. Following the knife money, he actually saw a small stream of blood flowing out of the ground. What was Beta doing? This situation was becoming increasingly strange and terrifying. Jiang Wang couldn't help but stop in his tracks. However, the knife coin continued to fly in the air above the bloodstream, as if it wanted to go against the flow. Jiang Wang was somewhat hesitant. Beidou asked him for help, but he didn't say whether this matter was dangerous or not. Now it seemed that this was clearly not a simple matter. Suddenly, a voice rang out. "Is that kid Jiang? Quickly come and help me." It was Beidou's voice. This voice carried an echo, as if it came from some cave. Jiang Wang subconsciously activated his immortal sound detection state to confirm that the voice was indeed from Beidou. Then, he gripped his long sword and slowly walked forward, following the knife coin in front of him and going upstream. The more he observed, the more frightened he became. This stream of blood was not a dried-up stream that was filled with blood. Instead, it was the blood that wound around the strange rocks, winding down and corroding the ground, forming this stream. In other words, there was originally no stream, and the blood was still very fresh. With so much blood, how many people had to die before it was enough? With such corrosive properties, how was this human blood produced? Without another word, Jiang Wang turned and left. To hell with the vitality stones. To hell with his top-notch outer secret-level Dao techniques. This matter was full of strangeness, and now it was bloody. According to the books, a gentleman wouldn't stand under a collapsing wall. Jiang Wang, who had already started studying, naturally practiced the wisdom of the predecessors. Jiang Wang? Jiang Wang. Perhaps he ran too decisively, but Beidou's voice also paused for a moment before it rang out again, sounding a little anxious. "Don't run." Jiang Wang ran even faster. He even directly flew up, stepping on the Qingyun mark to increase his speed. Beidou's old voice chased after him. "You heartless bastard! The fortune-teller devil-man schemed against you with the art of blood divination. If I hadn't given you a protective talisman, you would have been skinned alive and eaten clean. Don't you have any sense of gratitude? Fortune-telling devil-man." Jiang Wang naturally remembered. At the Azure Cloud Pavilion in the Yong country, he had acted to protect the last of the Feng family's bloodline, preventing the blood of balance from reaching perfection. Furthermore, he had seized the Azure Cloud Pavilion and cultivated the instant clear skies immortal technique. As a result, he had offended the human demon. Cut meat and 10,000 evildoers, those two innocent evildoers, unmasked devil man, that cruel evildoer, Feng Helling, who somehow became a heart devil of hatred, and that mysterious fortune-teller, who only appeared in the mouths of those devil men. Jiang Wang had been wary of them for a long time. He paid close attention to news related to the human demons so that he wouldn't be caught off guard when they came knocking on his door. But later on, he rose through the ranks in Qi and was no longer as fearful of those human demons. No matter how evil and strong the demonic humans were, they were like ants in front of Qi. Now that Beidou mentioned the fortune-teller devil man, it made up for the destruction of the amulet in Qingyang town. It turned out that the human demon had never let go of this grudge. After such a long time, the one who made his move was the one life, one fortune-teller. Of course, Jiang Wang believed him. He gritted his teeth and was about to turn around. Beidou's voice chased after him. "I'll give you another 10 primordial stones." Jiang Wang could swear that he really didn't do it for the primordial stones. He was ready to agree. So Beidou increased the price. Of course, he increased the price. Jiang Wang held his sword and turned around without saying a word. He flew forward along the bloodstream for hundreds of feet and finally saw a deep cave on the cliff. After experiencing the underwater of Qingjiang and the ancient Devil's Cave in the Winda Mountains, Jiang Wang was now a little scared when he saw the cave. After all, he almost died when he entered the Devil's Cave twice. Fortunately, some light could be seen in this cave, which was different from the ancient Devil's Cave. The Qi knife coin flew in first. Jiang Wang watched for a moment, and then flew in as well. The bloodstream gurgled, and the source was also in the cave. This should be a naturally formed cave. There were no traces of human activity, except for the bloodstream. It was very dark in the cave. Jiang Wang's left hand, which was holding the sword, was quite relaxed. He had already put away his cloak, and the Rui, immortal robe had also returned to its green state. Every step he took was on the ground, carefully observing everything in the cave. The cave was narrow at the front and wide at the back. Due to the angle, he couldn't see the situation inside. This way, Yu Beidu's voice sounded from the left. Jiang Wang followed the Qi knife coin without saying a word. He turned left and saw Yu Beidu. At this moment, Yu Beidu's silver hair was shining. His thin face and wrinkles were glowing with jade light. At first glance, he looked like an immortal. He didn't look like a blackmailer at all. He sat cross-legged in midair. His left hand was in front of his knees, and his right hand was in the shape of a sword, pointing downwards. A person was lying on the ground with his arms and legs spread out. It was a white-faced, beardless old man in embroidered clothes. His hands and feet were shackled by jade rings. The other end of the jade rings was deep in the ground. The old man in embroidered clothes was motionless. His throat was cut open and blood kept flowing out. This person was the source of the bloodstream outside. Using the throat as the eye, blood flowed out. Without 300 to 500 years, his blood won't run out. Yu Beidu also remained motionless. Only his voice sounded, explaining to Jiang Wang. It seemed that he was suppressing the old man in embroidered clothes, which was why he was able to keep bleeding. However, the blood flowing out of the cave had already corroded the ground, forming a small stream. It would take another 300 to 500 years for the blood to run out. How much blood was there? What kind of powerhouse was this? What kind of top-tier power was behind him? What kind of enemies did Yu Beidu have? It felt like he couldn't afford to offend any of them. Jiang Wang paused for a moment, then said hesitantly, "Then I'll come back to see you in 300 to 500 years." Yu Beidu's eyes didn't move, but his tone was very lively. "Young friend, you really know how to joke." Jiang Wang was just about to say that he wasn't joking, but Yu Beidu continued, "This is a blood demon. If he escapes, he will definitely bring disaster to the world. The number of people he has sacrificed to grow to his current level is uncountable. After I discovered him in the Rhone Kingdom, I chased him all the way here before I finally managed to subdue him. His demon heart has already been sealed by me, and his limbs have been locked down by the earth veins I've connected to. However, there is still a ball of lifeblood that has escaped into the depths of the canyon, and it can come to the main body's rescue at any time. This place is desolate and uninhabited, so it's hard to ask for outside help. The last person I contacted was you. I could only invite you here." So that jade bracelet was directly connected to the earth veins. What a mysterious method. "What can I do?" Jiang Wang asked. "You can protect me here for a long time," Yu Beidu said. "Or you can chase after that ball of lifeblood and destroy it." "Can I defeat it?" Jiang Wang asked directly. "That ball of lifeblood's strength shouldn't surpass the inner palace level. If your title as the Yellow River's chief isn't fake, then it shouldn't be a problem." When he heard that it was only at the inner palace level, Jiang Wang's confidence instantly returned. "Where can I find it?" "Just follow your saber money, but it's best if you hurry. As time passes, it will awaken more of its battle instincts to adapt to its state after it leaves its main body. In other words, it has the potential to grow. This is also why the blood demon took the risk to split it apart in hopes that it would come to his rescue." "Awaken?" Jiang Wang frowned. "Yes," Yu Beidu said indifferently. "The blood demon's origin is far more terrifying than you can imagine." Jiang Wang thought back to the demonic spear he had encountered in the ancient Devil's Cave. Even though it had been formed from extremely weak demonic chi, he had almost lost his life when that spear had struck him. He couldn't help but retract his arrogance. He asked cautiously, "How long has it been since it split apart?" "Not long ago," Beidou replied. Jiang Wang confidently turned around. "It's best to chase after a desperate enemy. I'll be right back." Chapter 1308. Since the blood demon's lifeblood had the possibility of awakening, Jiang Wang couldn't give it too much time. There is a world of difference in the way experts of different levels use the same amount of power. In the ancient devil cave in the Wushida mountain range, the black-clothed demon had taught Jiang Wang a good lesson. Jiang Wang was about to walk out when he heard Beidou say, "Wait, take this with you." A brightly colored kasaya floated in front of Jiang Wang, and he caught it with one hand. It was rough to the touch, but in his hand, there was a calming sense of tranquility. However, when the world-renowned physiognomist Beidou took out a kasaya, it felt awkward no matter how one looked at it. Jiang Wang paused. "This is—" Beidou stared at the embroidered old man on the ground. "After you destroy that lifeblood, use this demon-subduing kasaya to wrap it up. Then bury it in the loathing point in the Rocky Valley. When the time comes, your knife money will take you there." So this strange rock valley had a name. It was quite appropriate to call it the Rocky Valley. "Demon subduing kasaya?" Jiang Wang asked. Beidou explained, "This Rocky Valley is a natural formation. When I came in, I stopped it so you didn't feel it. The loathing point is pressure. The so-called loathing point is the core area that suppresses the power of the Rocky Valley. The blood demon can divide its lifeblood to save itself, and I can also use that lifeblood to devour its body and speed up its destruction. To do this, the loathing point and the demon subduing kasaya are indispensable." "I'm asking," Jiang Wang said faintly. "Aren't you a physiognomist? Why did you take out a kasaya?" It wasn't convenient for Beidou to turn around to look at him, but a hint of disdain could be heard in his tone. "It's good enough that it's useful. Young people shouldn't be too picky. What's wrong with a kasaya? As long as it's useful, you can take out any underwear. When I was young, my life was bitter. I had to split one money into two. Can you give me a discount?" "Hey, why are you leaving? How rude." Jiang Wang wasn't in the mood to listen to him reminiscing about the past. Carrying his sword, he went out of the cave. Dao Qian led the way diligently. In this valley full of strange rocks, Jiang Wang walked on air, not coming into contact with those strange rocks so as not to disturb the whatever formation. The stream of blood was still meandering. It was unknown how large this stream of blood would be when the blood devil was completely destroyed. Not long after, one person, one saber, and one coin passed through the Rocky Valley. There was still a thin line of sky in front of him, and he couldn't see the end of it. The cramped, broken soul gorge seemed to imprison heaven and earth here. He was nothing more than a prisoner in the midst of it all. The blue cloud mark under his feet kept appearing and disappearing. Jiang Wang suddenly began to accelerate. In this canyon, it was as if he had turned into a bolt of green lightning, piercing through the fog and disappearing into the distance in a flash. He was accelerating, and so was the Qi Dao coin. Although he couldn't see it now, Jiang Wang was sure that the faint thread was still connecting them. That was why they were so similar. What could a lump of life blood turn into? Where did the so-called origin of the blood devil, the so-called awakening, point to? Why did the blood devil's separated life blood flee to the depths of the broken soul gorge? Was it just to delay time and wait for the awakening? What was in the depths of the broken soul gorge? The whistling wind couldn't give any answer. But Jiang Wang, who was flying fast, suddenly became alert. There was a sharp wind coming. A crescent blade came and chopped the Qi Dao coin in front of him. On the way to the broken soul gorge from the Zhao country, this was the first time someone saw this coin and tried to attack it. This was a high-level insight, but unfortunately, it couldn't cut the coin. The crescent blade fell, and the coin was chopped away. It immediately flew back and kept turning in the air, indicating that the target had been found. A big hand with blue veins popping out reached out and grasped the handle of the crescent blade. Suddenly, a tall and sturdy man wearing bright armor appeared from the side of the cliff. He had a dignified appearance and was very awe-inspiring. If it weren't for the hint of the coin that Ubedu attracted, no one would be able to tell that he was just a lump of life blood separated from the blood devil. The moment he grasped the handle of the crescent blade, it seemed to come alive and was very agile. With just a tremble in the wind, it was already in front of him. This blade was like a flood dragon coming out of the sea, stirring up wind and rolling waves. It directly split the air, and a terrifying wave of air rushed to the cliffs on both sides, making intense crashing sounds. But the person was silent. His eyes were cold, and only the purest of murderous intent surged. This didn't seem like a person, but more like a murderous puppet. Jiang Wang advanced instead of retreating, and the Sauvignon longsword was already out of its scabbard. Clang! 10 years of abject poverty, life and death grudges. A line fell between heaven and earth, and another line opened. The crescent blade and the horizontal Sauvignon longsword collided, and sparks flew from the blade and the sword. The crescent blade trembled, and the blade made a Z shape in the air. It was like a skilled butcher dismembering an ox, easily cutting through the sword momentum. Jiang Wang pulled back his sword, and a silver light instantly exploded, forming a circle. The silver-white sword circle formed a temporary fortress. In midair, the man in bright armor only retracted his crescent blade and stabbed forward. The huge and fierce crescent blade actually felt like a dagger in his hands. It was extremely agile. The tip of the crescent blade touched the silver-white sword circle. Clang! There was only a slight sound of collision. The sword circle had already collapsed. Jiang Wang tilted his head slightly, and a ray of light from the crescent blade brushed past the left side of his face, breaking through the wind and flying away. Although the sword circle had collapsed, and the ray of light had dissipated, the body of the Sauvignon longsword shouldered the brunt of the force and faced the opponent head-on. It was like a bright moon rising, illuminating the long night without sleep. It was the sublimated version of the Sauvignon sword style. The bright moon of the sword was aimed directly at the opponent's face. The man in bright armor's eyes didn't waver in the slightest. He only lightly pushed the hilt of his crescent blade, and the crescent blade fell diagonally, slashing the bright moon and shattering it. From the beginning until now, Jiang Wang hadn't been able to feel how powerful the opponent was. It was completely in line with Ubedu's description of within the inner mansion level. But the edge of his crescent blade was like a swimming dragon or a flying phoenix, ethereal and unpredictable, as if he was writing with a brush, natural and unrestrained. He could always find the most appropriate trajectory and cut the sword style apart. It was disintegration rather than confrontation. Technique was close to the Tao. Jiang Wang estimated that his swordsmanship was close to the peak of this realm, and he wasn't too far behind Qin Jijin. In the great illusionary land, he had fought with swordsman Ning, who had excellent swordsmanship, and both of them had won and lost. But in front of this man in bright armor, his swordsmanship didn't seem to have any secrets. It was like an originally complete person had been dismembered in a single move. This couldn't help but be startled. Was this the battle instinct that would gradually awaken that Ubedu had mentioned? Or was it just instinct? Although Jiang Wang was startled, he wasn't afraid, nor was he dispirited. Stepping on the blue cloud mark, he quickly retreated and then advanced again. As he retreated, he had already begun to knock on the 5 mansions. When he advanced again, the 5 brilliant light sources in his body lit up one after another. In an instant, the 5 mansions were illuminated at the same time. The brilliance of the 5 supernatural powers flowed from his body to his long sword. At this moment, he was so dazzling that one couldn't look straight at him. His body emitted a magnificent light as he faced his opponent head-on. His sword was as straight as a mountain. It was the same sword that had been at the peak of the river viewing platform since ancient times. But it was even stronger than that day. If he couldn't win in terms of combat technique, then he would break through with strength. In the inner mansion level, The Mansion of Heaven was undoubtedly the highest peak, and Jiang Wang was at this peak. Chapter 1309. He originally thought that it would take a lot of time to find the Lifeblood Incarnation, but he didn't expect the Lifeblood Incarnation to take the initiative to attack. It was probably because he was confident in his combat skills that he didn't take Jiang Wang, who was at the Inner Mansion, seriously. Perhaps this was also the reason why Beidou invited him when enemies met on a narrow path, life and death battle. Jiang Wang's few swords were useless, so he immediately displayed his strongest state in the 5 prefectures. The peak sword force of the Inner Mansion level directly crushed over. The man in bright armor danced with a large glaive as nimbly as an embroidery needle. It moved left and right in midair like a dragon and a phoenix dancing. What a great play! The glaive light turned into the shadow of the sun, penetrating everywhere and landing everywhere. He actually used a much weaker strength to cut into the sword attack. It slashed past from all sides, constantly weakening the sword. However, it was like a mountain peak falling head-on. No matter how much it was weakened, the mountain was still a mountain. When one's technique was limited, the limit of the Inner Mansion level was the limit of this glaive. No matter how nimble it was, no matter how exquisite the glaive technique it could use, even the peerless glaive technique taught by a perfected lord was only at the Inner Mansion level when used by an Inner Mansion cultivator. Thus, the sword crashed down. The bright armor directly shattered, and the chest of the burly man holding the glaive was pierced through. It was a huge hole that an adult could almost stick his head in. However, this person was expressionless, as if he couldn't feel any pain and was definitely not affected. The glaive in his hand still appeared and disappeared mysteriously, quietly sticking to Jiang Wang's neck. Since Jiang Wang knew that this burly man was formed by the blood demon's lifeblood, he naturally didn't think that he had finished off his opponent with one sword strike. A wisp of frosty white wind gently blew in the hole in the burly man's chest. It was as if it wanted to soothe his pain and comfort his organs that had been shattered by the sword chi. However, wherever the frosty wind went, everything was destroyed. This kind of comfort was obviously not what the other party wanted to see. The burly man wanted to slash with his glaive, but he couldn't because his arm had already been blown apart. His entire body shattered inch by inch, turning into droplets of blood that flowed in the air. Following which, the guandao and the fragments of the armor turned into blood and scattered across the sky. Jiang Wang used his multicolored kasaya to sweep up the blood that filled the sky. The kasaya naturally tightened, forming a bundle. The colorful bag would bulge from time to time. Clearly, the ball of lifeblood that was wrapped in it was restless. However, the brilliance of the demon vanquishing kasaya kept it under control. Jiang Wang carried the cassock in one hand and turned around to fly back. The 5 brilliant lights on his body gradually dimmed. Stepping on the blue clouds, he was still confident and at ease, but there was a feeling that he had not had enough. It had to be said that this man formed from lifeblood was indeed a very rare opponent. In terms of combat skills, it could be said that he was firmly superior to him. However, under the absolute power of the 5 prefectures' simultaneous glory, he had lasted for too short a time, so he had not been able to display his full strength. After attaining the Heaven's Sanctum, he had been cultivating wholeheartedly. He had never found a suitable opponent to test his sword on, and he had never experienced the loneliness of not having a sword to wield. Although today's battle was exciting, it had ended too quickly. It could only be considered a superficial experience. However, if Jiang Wang wanted to deliberately delay time to fully enjoy the battle and give the opponent formed from lifeblood a chance, he would absolutely refuse. A battle on a narrow path was very simple. The winner would live, and the loser would die. Sharpening one's combat skills and comprehending one's moves were all matters of victory and defeat. Jiang Wang had always been very clear-headed. Dao Qian turned around and continued to lead the way. Jiang Wang followed closely behind and flew toward the Valley of Rocks. The matter was done. It was time to ask for his reward. Within the valley of rocks, in the cave on the cliff, the sage-like Beidou sat cross-legged in midair. He, who had firmly held the blood demon in place, was also restrained by the blood demon. The body of a Yang country's eunuch Lu Huai was the emotionless and desireless blood demon. It was cultivated using the emotionless and desireless blood demon technique. In this period of time, it had gone through the Yang country's last emperor Yang Jinda, the Yang country's eunuch Lu Huai, and the Rome country's leading light city's general Jingyi. Among the three of them, Yang Jinda firmly controlled this demonic technique. He used the might of the demon, but his words and actions were all true. At most, it was because he cultivated this demonic technique that he gradually extinguished his emotions. Lu Huai, on the other hand, was completely devoured and driven by this demonic technique. He had no consciousness of his own. As for the leading light city's general Jingyi, he was killed by Lu Huai while investigating the large number of casualties in the city. He was devoured by the emotionless and desireless blood demon technique and also lost himself. Rather than saying that Lu Huai and Jingyi were the next two masters of the emotionless and desireless blood demon technique, it was better to say that they were the two puppets of the technique. Yang Jinda was killed by the life-reaping saber and had no chance of recovery. When Lu Huai faced Beidou in leading light city, he used all his means and fled everywhere in the eastern region. In the end, he fled all the way to the Broken Soul Gorge, but he was still suppressed. He could only spare a small portion of his lifeblood to transform into Jingyi and wait for an opportunity to save him. However, this was already calculated by Beidou, and he had even been waiting for this step. Before entering the Broken Soul Gorge, Beidou had already urgently contacted Jiang Wang, who was still in Zhao country. Not long after the blood demon divided his lifeblood, Jiang Wang had already entered the Broken Soul Gorge. While suppressing Lu Huai, Beidou had Jiang Wang chase after that ball of lifeblood. He wanted to use this lifeblood as a foundation and borrow the natural formation of the chaotic rock valley to destroy the blood demon. He called himself the Divine Ghost Calculator, but it was not an exaggeration. At this moment, the pale and beardless Lu Huai was imprisoned on the ground, while the extremely elegant Beidou sat high up in the air. However, a sigh suddenly sounded. Sigh. Lu Huai was silent. Beidou was silent. Where did this sigh come from? The cave was dark and cold. A middle-aged man dressed in scholar's clothes brought the answer. This man had a long beard and a thin face. He looked more like a teacher than anything else. However, those who truly knew who he was could not remain calm. The 9 great, demonic fortune-teller, human demon. One life, one fortune. He walked into this cave with an indescribable smile on his face. He raised his eyes to look at Beidou, who was sitting cross-legged in the air. "Martial uncle, long time no see," he said. "How have you been? Have you been able to sleep every night?" Beidou was still pointing his sword at the blood demon on the ground. His body did not move. He only said, "Didn't we just meet last time in Guiding Light City? We should have caught up then. It's all your fault for running away too quickly." The divination master reached out and patted his forehead. "Ah, yes. Look at my memory." He sighed again and said somewhat sorrowfully, "Even I am starting to grow old. Martial uncle, time is unforgiving. You're already so old. What's there to be unhappy about?" Beidou said in an aged voice. "Look, Martial uncle is very open-minded. Seeing you appear in front of me, I don't even make a move." The divination master withdrew his sorrowful expression and looked at him with a smile. "Isn't it because Martial uncle can't move right now?" Beidou was silent for a moment and said, "I mainly don't want to move right now. Good Martial nephew, don't force Martial uncle to place righteousness above family." Righteousness above family. The divination master lowered his head and murmured. When he raised his head again, his eyes were already filled with undisguised, cold, killing intent. However, his voice was gentle and slow. "I was just about to cut open Martial uncle's heart to see what righteousness looks like and what color it is. Chapter 13:10. The diviner walked closer to Ubedu as he spoke. "Oh, wait," Ubedu said. "Is there something else, Martial Uncle?" The diviner stopped and asked softly. It wasn't that he was willing to give his opponent too much time, but he knew that the longer Blood Demon and Ubedu remained in this state, the deeper the entanglement between the two. Ubedu wouldn't be able to free himself, although victory was already in his grasp. There was no harm in waiting for a bit more assurance. After all, the opponent was Ubedu with unfathomable power. Even if he knew the terror of the Blood Demon's origin and knew that the unmoving Ubedu was entangled with the Blood Demon, he didn't dare to be certain that Ubedu really didn't have a backup plan. How could divination for half a lifetime be so simple? The more important it was, the more he couldn't rush forward. If you want to know, you could just ask Martial Uncle. Why do you have to be so bloody? Although Ubedu stared at Lu Huai on the ground, he also laughed. Righteousness looks like your Martial Uncle. As for the color, it's red. Is that so? The diviner laughed. I don't believe it. Martial Uncle is used to lying. I must see it with my own eyes. Don't argue with Martial Uncle, Ubedu said. To tell you the truth, Martial Uncle still has a helper here. Look carefully at this Blood Demon. Isn't it still missing a portion of life blood? Martial Uncle's helper has already gone to crush it and will be back soon. You should leave first. Martial Uncle's helper's temper isn't very good. If he wants to kill you, Martial Uncle can't stop him. Listen to Martial Uncle's advice. Where there's life, there's hope. The diviner was surprised. I've never heard of Jiang Wang's temper being this bad. What Jiang Wang? Ubedu said reluctantly. Martial nephew, you're still joking at this time. Do you want Martial Uncle, a white-haired man, to send you, a black-haired man? The diviner said in surprise. I saw him enter soul-breaking gorge with my own eyes. Did I see wrongly? You might have seen wrongly. Ubedu's tone was very serious. The diviner nodded thoughtfully. I've been looking for him for a long time. This possibility exists. Martial Uncle's words make sense. He was so cooperative, but Ubedu couldn't continue the conversation. He let out a long sigh and said, I didn't expect that you would actually set a trap to harm Martial Uncle. You've forgotten your ancestors. The fortune teller's tone was also very regretful. I didn't think that you would actually deceive your martial nephew at this time. What a disrespectful old man. Ubedu sighed again. Looks like I'm going to die today. Everyone dies eventually, the fortune teller said with a smile. Martial Uncle's predictions are so accurate. Time and fate. Ubedu stared at the expressionless Lu Huai with a serious expression. He was very clear that Blood Devil didn't seem to have any consciousness at this moment. He didn't move at all, as if he had accepted his fate. But as soon as he gave an opening, he would immediately receive the fiercest counterattack. Since ancient times, it was easy to exterminate demons. But how difficult was the demon extermination technique? He said, Senior Uncle, there's something you don't understand. The fortune teller was very polite. Please go ahead. Ubedu asked. This Mieching Jiu blood demon body was not in the path of fate and was not affected by divination. How did it become your chess piece? How could you have predicted that I would protect Jiang Wang? The fortune teller reminded him. These are two different matters. Martial Uncle was confused. Ubedu said, Then can Martial Nephew resolve these two matters? The fortune teller smiled. How could I have predicted Martial Uncle's future? I only thought that Martial Uncle would have predicted my future. I understand, Ubedu said. What about the previous matter? How could I have predicted that this Mie Qing Jiu blood demon body could grow to its current state? Martial Uncle, you couldn't have predicted it either, right? The fortune teller smiled. Maybe it was heaven's will. Martial Nephew had originally prepared another scheme, but he encountered this blood devil, and thus came up with an even more perfect plan. The cycle of the heavens, retribution. What do you think, Martial Uncle? This scheme was well calculated. Ubedu praised. Taking advantage of the situation and following heaven's will. To be able to use the blood devil to this extent, you are already stronger than your master. The fortune teller grinned and said in a cold voice, You still dare to mention my master, just a little. Yu Beidou continued. The blood devil is a disaster for the human race. How could you place your personal grudge above the safety of the human race? Is that so? You still want to educate me? The fortune teller laughed and asked, for the safety of the human race, shouldn't I wait for you to destroy this blood devil before making a move against you? You are worth teaching. Yu Beidou praised. I am a human demon. After all, isn't there still a personal character? The safety of the human race is too far away, but my personal grudge is right in front of me. Martial uncle. Let go of a thought, and everything is free. Martial uncle can introduce you to Mount Meru. Martial uncle is still so humorous. The fortune teller sneered and suddenly asked a question like a sharp blade unsheathed. Do you think that little friend of yours can bring you a little surprise? Let me guess, you want to use the formation of this chaotic stone valley to deal with me, right? Now that little friend of yours is going to grasp the key point? Without waiting for Yu Beidou to answer, he continued, the blood-leaving body is fleeing to the north. I can't be more clear about the location of him and that lifeblood. He smiled calmly. I've already sent people to find him. Yu Beidou, who was sitting cross-legged in midair, still hadn't moved. He only said, then the people you send better be strong enough. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a pity if they were killed? I think they're strong enough, the fortune teller said softly. That's our toy, why don't you send us? At this time, a fat figure rolled into the cave and said with dissatisfaction in a muffled voice, That's right, that's right. A thin figure followed at the side and repeatedly agreed. The 9 great devils, flesh slicing, and 10,000 evils appeared at this time. Don't be in such a hurry, the fortune teller coaxed. You 2 brothers are of great use here. Look at the person in front of us. Yu Beidou, how can we do without 2 pillars of support like you at such a crucial time? Zhang Fei slowly walked over and carefully looked at Yu Beidou, who was sitting cross-legged in midair. He pulled out his large machete and said happily, I'm going to slice him. I've never sliced a true master before. Li Shou followed closely and also seemed very excited. Me neither. Me neither. Don't be in a hurry. Don't fight. Everyone has a share. The fortune teller stopped them. This is my martial uncle. You can't wolf down his food. It's only interesting if you chew it slowly. Wouldn't it be better if you guys talked about this behind my back? Yu Beidou suddenly said. The fortune teller said to Zhang Fei and Li Shou calmly, as if he had everything under control. Don't be fooled by this little old man's wretched appearance. His methods are ruthless. I guess he still has the strength for one attack, but he'll be out soon. He began to walk while speaking. With every step he took, a stone pillar rose in the place he walked past. Like this, he circled around Yu Beidou and Lu Huai. A total of 49 stone pillars surrounded Yu Beidou and Lu Huai. The blood flowing from Lu Huai's neck just happened to flow through the gap between 2 stone pillars, so it wasn't affected in the slightest. Preposterous, you're the wretched one, Yu Beidou said angrily. This old man was also a jade tree in the wind back then, and now I'm a pear blossom begonia. It seemed that he didn't care about the stone pillars the fortune teller had set up, only the word wretched. The fortune teller ignored him and only laughed softly. Now, let's wait for Jiang Wang to come. Zhang Fei, who was somewhat gloomy, became happy again. The toy will still come? Li Shou repeatedly asked, Really? Really? Or his corpse will come? The fortune teller added indifferently. Chapter 13:11. Jiang Wang held the sword in one hand and the cassock in the other as he flew towards the Valley of Rocks. He was still thinking about the lifeblood incarnation's saber technique that was close to the Tao. The more he thought about it, the more mysterious it was. He wanted to perform it again. Only he and the saber money traveled in the long, soul-breaking gorge, so he didn't feel lonely. He was already used to traveling alone. Just as he was immersed, he suddenly saw the saber money in front of him turn around. It flew up and down anxiously, as if it was reminding him of something. It flew to the side of the cliff, probably to carve some words, but there was no need. Jiang Wang already saw that at the mouth of the gorge ahead, at the entrance of the Valley of Rocks, stood a man more than 8 feet tall. His upper body was bare, and his muscles were like rocks, giving off a particularly tough feeling. He held a cone-shaped heavy sword with both hands. Because it was completely round like an iron rod, it was only sharp at the end, so it could be called an awl. But it clearly had a sword guard and a sword hilt. In short, it was such a strange sword and such a muscular person. However, Jiang Wang's attention was more on the sky. To be more precise, it was a graceful woman wearing a faceless mask hanging on the left side of the cliff. It was the mask unveiling human demon he had seen at the Azure Cloud Pavilion of Yom. Since she was here, then this muscular man must be one of the human demons. In this soul-breaking gorge, he encountered two human demons blocking his way. It was really a narrow path. Cough. This muscular man looked very rough, but he was actually very polite when he opened his mouth. I want to ask, can you pay more attention to me? Because the next battle is mainly between you and me. If you only care about the mask unveiling, it will make me lose face. Is that so? Jiang Wang casually put the cassock wrapped in the lifeblood incarnation into the storage box. Are you sure it's a one-on-one battle? The muscular man scratched his head and said somewhat embarrassedly, this depends on the situation. After all, there are two of us, and we're already here. Jiang Wang was still looking at the mask unveiling human demon called Swallow. His body was more relaxed, and his eyes were more calm. Annoying. You're so indecent at such a young age. The swallow in the air said in a delicate voice. Where are you looking at? Vital, Jiang Wang replied simply. The swallow giggled, and its plump body swayed along with the earth. Which vital point are you referring to? She asked seductively. Facing two demonic humans at the same time made Jiang Wang's fighting spirit, which had just calmed down, boil once again. However, his voice became even calmer as he said, a vital point that will kill you. What a reckless man. You don't understand romance. Yinzi didn't take it to heart. She said in a tender voice, wait for big sister to teach you well. Seeing that they were all chatting, the muscular man felt that he had lost the limelight. He hurriedly said, let's get to know each other. I'm Beheader Devilman. My surname is Huan, and my name is Tao. Jiang Wang casually said, yes, I did. What about on Earth? He was just casually mocking him. Unexpectedly, Huan Tao replied seriously, even if I'm up there, I'll chop off your head too. So annoying. The swallow said coquettishly, going down and going up, which head are you talking about? Jiang Wang didn't respond to her vulgar words. He only said to Huan Tao, this sword of yours doesn't look very convenient for beheading. Huan Tao seemed to be tickled. He grinned and flipped the heavy sword over. Holding it with both hands, he crossed his hands, ka-ka. Amidst the sounds of the mechanism, two sharp blades appeared from the left and right sides of the black, iron rod-like sword. In an instant, it turned into a broadsword. The cylindrical body of the sword had now turned into a sword ridge. This was a mechanical heavy sword. The Beheader Devilman, who had the sixth highest number of heads, was actually a mechanical engineer. Is it convenient now? He laughed. It is quite convenient. Jiang Wang said casually. Oh, right. I'm very curious. I've been hiding for so long in a damn place like Broken Soul Gorge. How did you find me? Is it a fortune teller? It's actually a coincidence. Yinzi said coquettishly. The fortune teller is looking for his good martial uncle, so he brought us here. I didn't expect to bump into you. It's killing two birds with one stone. Martial uncle? The fortune teller, and you Beidou? Jiang Wang pondered in his heart. He knew it wasn't just that. How could a shameless old man who extorted people on the street let him take advantage of him? Take off your mask. Huan Tao was very alert. He quickly stopped her and said, he's trying to get information. Yinzi said unhappily, you look so obedient. What's wrong with letting him take advantage of you? She looked at Jiang Wang and laughed softly. Does sister treat you well? Jiang Wang only said coquettishly, no matter how enchanting her figure was, no matter how enchanting her voice was. Looking at her, Jiang Wang only felt disgust in his heart. Yinzi stopped laughing and flew down. She landed in front of Huan Tao and faced Jiang Wang. The charm in her eyes was gone. There was only a cold, killing intent. Hey, Huan Tao said unhappily. I told you to let me try first. As part of the 9 Devil Men, as experienced members of the Outer Tower of Remarkable Powers, they had the confidence to face Jiang Wang, who was at the Inner Mansion realm. However, Jiang Wang was more determined and colder than them. At the same time the swallow landed, he had already unsheathed his sword. Why are you fighting over who dies first? Why don't we fight together? This sentence was accompanied by the sound of the sword. When he finished speaking, he had already thrust his sword between the two of them. Only then did the azure cloud mark slowly dissipate behind him. He wanted to fight against 2 devil men by himself. The sword light was dazzling and exploded into a line. This line seemed to pull the sky from the dome down to the ground. In the eyes of Huan, Tao, and Yinzi, the tip of the sword was aimed at their throats. Yinzi's body swayed, and she retreated lightly, like a fallen leaf blown by the wind. On the other hand, Huan Tao only pushed the heavy mechanical sword forward. Crack, crack, crack. The tip of the sword was retracted. Then the metal, stick-like body of the sword blossomed like a flower. It actually opened into an iron umbrella, firmly protecting the front of the body. Clang! Changxi slashed the iron umbrella, but it only brought about a spark. The sword aura dissipated and couldn't enter the umbrella at all. Crack! 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 The iron umbrella opened and curled up. The surface of the umbrella was like a giant mouth that pounced out, wanting to bite Changxi. Jiang Wang retracted his sword and retreated out of the range of the giant mouth. The surface of the umbrella curled up and closed just like that. The tips gathered together and intertwined to form a spiral-shaped spearhead. This heavy sword instantly transformed into an iron spear. The original body of the sword transformed into the body of the spear. Huan Tao's right hand that was holding the hilt pushed forward. The sword guard bent down and became a slightly protruding joint on the body of the spear. With one hand in front of the joint and the other hand behind the joint, he held the spear with both hands and pushed it forward. In an instant, horses neighed, eagles cried, war drums sounded, and soldiers sang in unison. This spear displayed the posture of a magnificent army charging forward. On the battlefield, no matter where you come from, I will pierce through with my spear. Huan Tao was a mechanical engineer, but he was different from the majority of mechanical engineers who used puppets as their main fighting strength. His only weapon was his sword, and his strongest weapon was himself. Jiang Wang, who had retreated with his sword, reacted even more violently. Within the 5 prefecture sea, 5 inner palaces appeared. 5 brilliant light sources shone on his body. The light of the 5 divine abilities flowed around his body. At this moment, he was like a god. He gathered his strength and straightened his sword. Changxi rushed forward and attacked with the overturning mountain sword. Attack against attack. His sword was not only aimed at Huan Tao, but also at Yinzi, who had yet to make a move. In a narrow, broken soul gorge, there was not much space to dodge. This peerless sword strike from the ancient times directly covered the distance between him and the human demon. The terrifying sword aura filled the heaven and earth. The heaven and earth in the broken soul gorge was only a thin line, and this thin line was all for this sword. Chapter 13:12. How powerful was this strike? On the Tianya stage, it had killed Qin Jijin, a cultivator from the heaven's abode. Now that Jiang Wang had reached the heaven's abode level, under the combined glory of his 5 abodes, this strike could overturn the heavens and the earth. Neither Huan Tao nor Yinzi were willing to take it head-on, even though they were both outer building cultivators and famous outer building cultivators. They could only retreat. Before the tip of the sword hit the tip of the spear, Huan Tao was already flying backward. He seemed to have been hit and couldn't bear the force. His whole body fell backward. As he fell, the iron spear in his hand drew a semicircle from bottom to top. The arc was like a crescent moon and a scimitar. It was aimed at Jiang Wang, as if it wanted to cut open his heart and bury him. However, it couldn't get close to Jiang Wang at all. It didn't need to get close. This spear arc wasn't powerful because of its sharpness or its ability to kill. It was because of its destruction of the Force. This move looked simple, but it was the Mahis Sect's 19 arc moves that had once terrified all cultivators in the world. The Mahis Sect used mechanical puppets to run amok in the world. The puppet warriors they created could even fight against real cultivators. The Ink Warrior series was a typical example. However, puppet warriors were different from real cultivators. Driven by Tao origin stones, they could be compared to Tao origin. The various moves engraved and infused with the puppet's instincts wouldn't lose to the moves of ordinary cultivators. However, force and intent, these kinds of spiritual power, couldn't be realized through puppets. At least, before the Mahis sect developed the Divine Recovery Crystal, they couldn't do this. Before the Divine Recovery Crystal era, the Mahis sect solved this problem with the 19 arc moves. This was a move painstakingly created by the top cultivators of the Mahis sect. It was called using technique to break force. The so-called 19 arc moves was a peerless battle technique that could break all kinds of force under 19 basic situations and countless variations. When this technique was used, the world was shocked. The Mahis sect's puppet warriors had risen to a new level. Even today, the Divine Recovery Crystal was still a secret of the Mahis sect. To be able to grasp the 19 arc style, Huan Tao's identity before he became a human demon was definitely not simple. Jiang Wang's overturning mountain sword was a sword that condensed power and intent, mixed with essence, qi, and spirit, and carried everything into one sword, making it impossible to avoid. However, as soon as the spear arc was unleashed, it cut through that unavoidable momentum and broke free of the room to dodge. It was called breaking force. As for Huan Tao himself, after drawing an arc with his spear, he took the opportunity to retract his spear and turn it back into the heavy sword that looked like an iron rod. At the same time the heavy sword was restored, he straightened his upper body. Holding the sword, he slashed twice in the air, creating two intersecting sword arcs. It was the 19th arcade style again. They intersected in the air, as if they wanted to completely tear apart the sword that could topple mountains. However, this was only to stop the enemy. He suddenly sped up and retreated into the rocky valley in an instant. This muscular man, known as the Beheader Ogre, looked strong and clumsy, but he was shockingly fast. As for Jiang Wang, he faced the spear and sword arcs head-on and boldly advanced. The 19 arc style had the ability to break force, but it was still insufficient against his overturning mountain sword. After all, techniques were techniques, and people were people. The 19 arc style could break the world's force, but Huan Tao might not be able to break Jiang Wang. This was the reason why Jiang Wang had advanced and Huan Tao had retreated. Of the 9 human demons, Huan Tao was ranked 6th. As the 5th human demon, the mask unveiling human demon, Swallow naturally wouldn't just retreat. She retreated before Huan Tao, and as she did so, she waved her hand. Thousands of red-eyed swallows flew out from the cliffs on both sides, the red light flickering in each swallow's eyes. The red light flickered in and out of existence, as if ghostly flames had filled the sky. These flames shook one's soul, affected one's mind, and eroded one's heart. The swallow's appearance was only a deceptive facade. The core of this secret technique was actually the red light in the swallow's eyes. This technique's true name was the heart-losing lamp. One lamp illuminates the path. 1,000 lamps confuse the eye. 10,000 lamps lose the heart. This was a secret technique close to the supreme rank. The mask unveiling human demon had used this technique to kill over 100 outer sect cultivators. Once the heart-losing lamp appeared, even Huan Tao retreated in a hurry, unwilling to be contaminated. However, Jiang Wang, who was wielding his sword, only had a pure gold light in his eyes. Eternally immortal, eternally immovable. None of the external evils can move my heart. Amidst the flickering red light, Jiang Wang remained unaffected and unharmed. How could the heart-losing lamp move a pure heart? A trace of surprise flashed through Swallow's eyes, but she had already retreated into the Valley of Rocks with Huan Tao behind her. Jiang Wang naturally wasn't willing to give way, and continued forward with his sword. One man and one sword chased after two human demons of the outer sect. They slaughtered their way out of the long valley, and their momentum was like a rainbow, intending to pursue relentlessly. Just as the three of them crashed into the Valley of Rocks, one in front and one behind, rumble, those abrupt and strange rocks actually began to move. They were clearly moving very slowly, and the range was also very small, roughly 2 inches to the left and 3 inches to the right. However, the entire Valley of Rocks was instantly filled with clouds and fog, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. Swallow, Huan Tao, and Jiang Wang had all lost their target. In the cave, the fortune teller stepped out of the stone pillars and used them as a ring to temporarily set up a formation to trap Yu Beidou and counter any possible moves he might make. Yu Beidou's target wasn't Lu Huai, nor was it a mere puppet of the blood demon. He wanted to kill the blood demon art of emotion, extinguishing, and desire. What truly entangled and resisted him was never Lu Huai's body, but the ancient beast's skin scroll. The fortune teller, who usually hid and fled whenever he heard news of Yu Beidou from 1,000 miles away, knew this and thus dared to come to him at this time. At this time, Yu Beidou was in a difficult position, and the fortune teller was about to become a fisherman, harvesting both the sandpiper and the clam. This was the game he was most satisfied with. With Jiang Wang as the lead, he borrowed the blood demon's power to act. The time, place, and people were all in his favor. From the beginning to the end, he didn't directly plot against Yu Beidou. Due to the difference in cultivation and divination, if he directly targeted Yu Beidou, he would definitely be detected. Fortunately, he knew that Yu Beidou would also look for him. Fortunately, when he was setting up the formation in Rome, he encountered the blood demon. Fortunately, Yu Beidou chose to eliminate the blood demon first. If Yu Beidou only wanted to kill a puppet, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if he wanted to kill the blood demon art of emotion, extinguishing, and desire, even if it was only for a short period of 1,000 years, he had to trace the origin of the blood demon. This resulted in the current situation. The blood demon had lost blood for 300 years, and Yu Beidou was also entangled and couldn't move. Everything was as if it was made by nature. This was a wonderful situation. Zheng Lao-san, Li Lao-si, the fortune teller said lightly, "Get ready to move." When Swallow and Huan Tao started fighting, he already knew what was going on. When he told Zheng Fei and Li Lao-si that he wanted to wait for Jiang Wang or Jiang Wang's corpse to come over, he was actually saying it to confuse Yu Beidou. He wouldn't wait that long. He just wanted to make sure that Jiang Wang didn't have the ability to control the formation in Messy Rocks Valley. That was enough. However, Zheng Fei seemed to really believe him. He said unhappily, "Aren't we waiting for the toy?" Li Laosi also said, "Why aren't we waiting?" Without waiting for the fortune teller's explanation, Yu Beidou, who was sitting cross-legged in midair, already turned his head and asked, "Are we in such a hurry?" The fortune teller smiled faintly and said, "We have to be in a hurry to kill a tiger." He was stunned. Cold sweat dripped down. Yu Beidou, who couldn't move, actually turned his head. Yu Beidou looked at him and laughed. "Good martial nephew, don't panic." After laughing, he lightly blew a breath of air. In a split second, a gust of wind swept through the cave. It actually blew Zheng Fei and Li Laosi, who were caught off guard, out of the cave and into Messy Rocks Valley. Chapter 13:13. The divination master's reaction was extremely fast. Almost at the same time, he activated the large formation formed by the stone pillars. At first, these stone pillars looked dark and rough, but now that they were reacting, the reliefs on the stone pillars instantly became clear. They were peddlers, scholars, heroes, and heroes. The scene on each stone pillar was different. The 49 stone pillars all released a blazing white light. The blazing light interweaved into a net, trapping Yu Beidou and Lu Huai in it. The blazing light was fierce, but it didn't make people feel hot. Instead, it only made people feel endless cold. There was the sound of a sad song, as if the gods were sad. There was the sound of grief, as if ghosts were weeping. The world was like a cage, locking gods and ghosts in. Extreme hatred. Rumble. Inside the cave, gods wept and ghosts wept. Outside the cave, the chaotic stone valley also underwent a great change. Just as Fatty Zheng and Skinny Lee were thrown out of the cave, the natural formation of the chaotic stone valley was activated. There was a wave in the valley and a wave in the cave. The divination master looked back at the formation outside the cave and knew that he couldn't count on 3rd Elder Zheng and 4th Elder Zheng. However, before entering the cave, he had clearly done something to the chaotic stone valley, but now he couldn't react at all. In the fight for this natural formation, he was undoubtedly at a disadvantage. He looked at Beidou again, his eyes filled with caution. Beidou, who was sitting cross-legged in the air, looked at the formation inside the cave and frowned. The world is like a cage? Blood sacrifice life locking formation? He sighed. You're on this wrong path. You're already drifting further and further away. These words clearly angered the divination master. He said with hatred, if you're right, why is there no place for you in the world? Why is there no longer any divination techniques in the world? Why are you chased out of Linzi like a dog? His eyes were filled with blood. His left hand was already holding up a small stone altar. A cold wind swirled around him, and a fierce aura suddenly rose. Beidou didn't say anything. He only moved his sword finger and pointed it at the divination master. This was his answer. In a split second, the dome of the gloomy cave was filled with twinkling stars. With the stellar transposition, an area of about 3 inches around the diviner seemed to sway. This sway lasted for an extremely short period of time and was almost imperceptible. But when it stabilized, the divination master discovered that he was already inside the array. The 49 stone pillars were connected to the dome and the ground. The dazzling white light formed a net that sealed off all gaps. It even covered the mortal world and severed karma. However, he was also locked up. Beidou, Lu Huai, and the fortune teller were all imprisoned within the stone pillars. Under such circumstances, many killer moves of the blood sacrifice lifelock formation could not be used, because he was also in the formation. The divination master didn't say anything. He raised the stone altar in his left hand and smashed it at Beidou. It was like a street brawl, but it was the most powerful and direct attack at this time. Inside the small stone altar, there was a world of its own. There were sounds of chanting scriptures, hawking, crying, roaring. All kinds of voices were mixed together like a tide, and there were all kinds of things in the world. Dense scarlet light surged on the altar, giving off an evil and tragic feeling. This small altar seemed to have occupied the entire world. On the other hand, Beidou's left hand, which had been forming hand seals all this time, stretched out its 5 fingers and suddenly flipped over. Thus, the world turned upside down. The stone altar in the fortune teller's hand was obviously smashed at Beidou, but it fell in the opposite direction. The more he used force, the farther it was pulled. He was clearly the one who smashed the altar at Beidou, but now the altar was pulling his hand outwards. This kind of reverse dislocation made people feel annoyed and dizzy. That fat man and thin man have the blood of balance, right? Beidou asked indifferently. You want to use them as substitutes at the crucial moment. How can I let you do as you wish? This natural chaos separation formation is enough for them to torment for a long time. The fortune teller's left hand struggled to push the stone altar back. His right hand curled 4 fingers, and only his index finger was vertical. The tip of his index finger drew a 2-inch long line of blood between his eyebrows. He said fiercely, "You think you can calculate everything? Not everything will go as you wish." The 2-inch long line of blood between his eyebrows suddenly turned and formed a circle of blood between his eyebrows. In the blood circle, a yellow line like a spirit snake slithered out, twisting and dividing the circle. Then, in the lower left and upper right symmetrical positions, 2 black dots appeared A blood-red taiji diagram was imprinted between his eyebrows just like that. It looked both evil and divine, direct and profound. The contradiction was indescribable, but incomparably powerful. No, that's not right. This blood-red taiji diagram was not between the fortune teller's eyebrows, because Ubedu's left hand had unknowingly pressed on his forehead. And this taiji diagram that was supposed to be imprinted on the fortune teller's forehead was actually imprinted on the back of Ubedu's hand. Star Shift, it was a miraculous skill. The back of Ubedu's hand trembled slightly, and the blood-red taiji diagram was bounced up. He spat out a breath like a white rainbow, piercing through the diagram and shattering it. You actually performed the taiji diagram. Ubedu's voice became increasingly indifferent. You've fallen too deeply into the mud, and you're already guilty of 10,000 deaths. The fortune teller looked at the shattered taiji diagram. It was his painstaking work, and it was also his trump card. For a moment, his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. You're a monkey wearing a hat, but you claim to be righteous, convicting me with just a few words. He looked at Ubedu with a ferocious expression. You old bastard. Who do you think you are? At this moment, he was not at peace at all. His plain and simple scholar's robes were extremely incompatible with his current state. This meant that he could no longer care about his temperament, or rather, he was unwilling. Crack! The 5 fingers of his left hand that grabbed the stone altar broke at the same time. He used so much strength. Finally, he pulled the altar back and smashed it towards Ubedu's face. His anger, his pain, and his hatred were all so clear and so deep. He wanted to kill Ubedu. He wanted to kill him even if his fingers were broken, even if his legs were broken. No one could stop him, and nothing could change his determination. Who am I? Ubedu looked at him with a pitiful gaze and said indifferently, I'm Ubedu. I inherited the fate of my ancestors, and my future path is sealed. The art of destiny, seizing, ends with me. He reached out with his hand in an incomparably natural and casual manner and snatched the altar from the diviner's hand. With a flip of his hand, the stone altar fell with a loud bang, and blood filled the air as it smashed towards Lu Huai, who had been lying silently on the ground all this time. It was clearly the diviner who had set up the blood sacrifice lifelock formation, but Ubedu seemed to have become the master of this place, and he was calm. He pointed to the east and hit the west, easily suppressing the diviner and even casually hitting the blood demon. The wound on Lu Huai's neck was still bleeding, and he seemed to be unaware of everything. At this moment, he opened his eyes. The stone altar stopped in front of his face, and he could not go any further. Suddenly, it seemed to have been corroded by some kind of power, and it shattered into stone powder, which was blown away by the wind. Lu Huai looked at Ubedu through the stone powder that was being blown away. He cried as soon as he opened his eyes, and they were tears of blood. Tears of blood flowed down from the corners of his eyes, and they meandered on his pale face like blood snakes. Kakik, he let out a hoarse, strange laugh. Since it's your end, you should die. Since Ubedu wanted to trace back to the source and destroy the emotion-extinguishing blood demon technique to the greatest extent, the blood demon could naturally obtain more power from a source. This was the reason why he could resist Ubedu. Once Ubedu split his power to deal with the diviner, he quickly regained his freedom. However, he was not chaotic and only had his instincts left. The reason he had deliberately pretended was to wait for the diviner to consume more of Ubedu's power. However, since Ubedu had already discovered it, there was nothing else to say. He could only kill. Amidst the strange, hoarse laughter, the 2 blood snakes that flowed down from the corners of his eyes soared up, and with a flash of bloodlight, they disappeared. Ubedu's expression did not change. He calmly drew a sword in front of his face, and one of the blood snakes was directly sliced apart. However, his body, which was sitting cross-legged in midair, could not help but sway a little. The back of his head swelled up high, and it turned out that another blood snake had already drilled into it and was crazily corroding it. This blood tears, transforming into blood snakes, did not appear to be very impressive. In fact, It was far inferior to the diviner's various tricks. However, its terror could be clearly seen on Beidou's body. At this moment, Beidou's eyes, nostrils, lips, and ears were all bleeding. Chapter 13:14. The diviner had obviously underestimated Beidou's strength. He thought that Beidou, who was deeply entangled with the blood demon and wanted to completely erase the emotion-extinguishing blood demon art, would not be able to deal with him. However, Beidou could do it. Beidou had also underestimated the blood demon. In other words, he had no choice but to divert some of his strength to quickly deal with the diviner. However, he had been killing the blood demon for so long that the blood demon's blood had already flowed out of the cave and formed a small stream in the valley. He had gone too deep into the blood demon origin. At this time, he still dared to relax and deal with the enemy, which immediately led to a backlash. The blood snake that drilled into the back of his head contained the power of lifeblood. When it drilled into his head, it had already corroded his life spirit and fought with him for control of this body. Bleeding from his 7 orifices was a sign that he had been taken over. The diviner, who had been ravaged by Beidou's stone altar and destroyed by the blood demon, finally had his chance. When he pulled back the stone altar, he had already forcefully broken the 5 fingers of his left hand. His 5 fingers were like 5 throwing daggers, piercing straight into the ground. They only pierced a finger joint before stopped by the blood sacrifice life locking formation formed by the 49 stone pillars. However, they only needed to stop there. The diviner's face was expressionless. Compared to the pain he had experienced before, what he was experiencing now was nothing. What was the pain of having his fingers cut off? North wind should come, he said with a sigh. His 5 fingers pierced into the ground, forming a formation with his flesh. Using his own blood to calculate the treacherous hearts of people, the winds and clouds of heaven and earth, forming a formation within a formation. His master was a peerless genius. He had created the blood sacrifice life divination technique from the declining life divination technique, opening a new path that had never been seen before. It could be said that he had found a new future for the life divination technique. Unfortunately, Beidou was afraid of his talent and set up a trap to kill him. The world had lost a top diviner, and he had lost his only family. For so many years, he had been hiding from place to place, unwilling to give up on studying the blood divination technique. He had even joined a valley of no return to seek protection, all for the sake of finding a way to end Beidou's life with the blood divination technique one day. Today was the time. His lineage had set the 8 hells. North was the killing hell, which was in charge of killing. That was why he had summoned Bay Foam. The howling of the wind was like the clashing of swords and spears, echoing in the dark cave. That echo was also mournful and melancholic, as if it would not live for long. This 5-finger blood array was connected to the sacrificial bloodlock life array at the bottom and the killing prison at the top, sealing off all directions, cutting off all paths of life, vowing to kill Beidou today. The first thing that appeared in the blood sacrifice lifelock formation was a ghost head saber. It was made of condensed evil energy and was extremely sharp. In the death prison, the ghost head saber was in charge of the first punishment, beheading the enemy head-on. The killing intent was the strongest. However, Beidou, who was bleeding from his 7 orifices, only glanced at Lu Huai. In his eyes, which were still bleeding, he could vaguely see the endless stream of traffic, the peddlers, the scenes of the world turning around like a torrent of water. What was destiny occupation? This was the most ancient divination technique passed down from generation to generation. It was a supreme technique used by human cultivators to probe the river of fate and enlighten the future. In ancient times, it had even enlightened the human emperor. As the person with the highest achievement in divination in the modern world, to a certain extent, he represented the silhouette of that glorious era. And he had seen it. His left hand formed a seal and flipped the sky, while his right hand still held up the sword fingers. When the seal was completed, the diviner suddenly fell down, smashing onto Lu Huai's body. The two of them lay on the ground in a crisscrossed horizontal and vertical position. And when the sword fingers fell, a powerful force that made one tremble gushed out without stopping, instantly rushing forward like a flood. Regardless of whether it was Lu Huai or the diviner, they had no choice but to use all their strength to resist, their bodies unable to move. A human demon, and a blood demon. The three paths of life intersected in the blood sacrifice life-lock formation, unable to be separated. At this moment, the ghost head saber of the death prison slashed half an inch into Yu Beidu's head, but could not go any further. At this moment, Yu Beidu was really battered and exhausted. There was a ghost head saber on his head, fresh blood flowing down his forehead. There was a blood bag at the back of his head that was hidden by the blood snake, which was still in constant conflict. However, he could not move and could only bear the pain. At this moment, Yu Beidu was really incomparably powerful. He held his fingers together like a sword, suppressing two with one finger. Suppressing one person, also suppressing one demon. After a fierce attack and defense, Lu Huai and the diviner were forcefully stacked together and suppressed. Yu Beidu was still sitting cross-legged in the air with his sword fingers raised. If one did not consider the ghost head saber on his head and the blood bag at the back of his head, it was as if nothing had happened. It was just that the diviner had been added into the entanglement between him and the blood demon. You are courting death. Lu Huai cannot move, but his voice was cold. Do you know how miserable your death will be? Yu Beidu said indifferently. I only know that this time, I will suppress you for at least 1,000 years. You want to return to your ancestral state? Dream on. Keek. Lu Huai laughed strangely. Wait. The diviner, who was pressing on Lu Huai, looked at Yu Beidu with hatred. Come, kill me. Kill me like you killed your senior brother, like you killed a dog. You don't have to try to provoke me, Yu Beidu said with an old voice. Wait until I suppress the blood demon and free my hands. Naturally, I will not let you go. I did not regret killing him back then. Even if I were to do it 10 times, 100 times, I would still do it. Killing you is no exception. Of course, why would you regret it? The hatred and anger in the diviner's voice disappeared. He was angry because of hatred, but also because of hatred, he became calm again. But there are still 4 human demons in the Valley of Rocks outside. How do you plan to deal with them? Without your control, how long can the innate chaos formation trap them? My friend will naturally take care of them, Yu Beidu said indifferently. Is that so? Jiang Wang of the Inner Mansion Realm? The world's #1 Inner Mansion Realm. Yu Beidu corrected. He will kill all of you disgusting things one by one. In the Valley of Rocks. Jiang Wang looked around and was confused. It was clearly the same strange rocks and the same valley, but he could not see a single person, and he could not tell where the path was. The Scarlet Heart divine ability could prevent him from being corrupted, but it could not show him the path. It was not that his heart was bewitched, but that the world was already in chaos. Jiang Wang's heart was as calm as water, and he did not let his agitated emotions corrupt him. He held the long sword in his hand and walked slowly. At this moment, the knife money he used to buy the amulet from Yu Beidu flew in front of him out of nowhere. It landed on the ground and engraved some words. You are in this formation with the 4 human demons. 4 human demons? Jiang Wang was somewhat hesitant. He only encountered the unveiled and the beheader. He did not know that there were 2 more in this formation. The knife money engraved some words again. The diviner is already under my control. The others have yet to reach God's descent. I will take you there and kill them one by one. So they had yet to reach God's descent. They were probably at the level of the beheader, human demon. Today, I will kill the human demons and get rid of a great evil for the people. Jiang Wang, who had repelled 2 human demons with 1 sword, was full of confidence. He shook his long sword and made a clanging sound. Lead the way. Chapter 13:15. The natural formation of the rocky valley was hard to find. Even if one looked around, they would not be able to detect it. Jiang Wang didn't know much about formations. He wasn't like Long Chuan or Yin Fu, who had access to all kinds of knowledge and had a solid foundation since young. His cultivation time was limited, and his resources were even more limited. He had to make a choice. For example, formations, medical skills, and the like were his sacrifices. But this Qi Dao Qian actually knew the way. He came and went freely among the strange rocks, leading Jiang Wang to take a few steps to the left and a few steps to the right. Soon, the enemy appeared in his field of vision. Jiang Wang saw beheading Devil Huan Tao's burly figure standing beside a strange rock. He looked like a human-shaped rock, looking into the distance as if he was looking for something. Yu Beidu's Qi Dao coin was really useful. They had already fought before. Although the fight was short, he had already seen the strength of this muscular man. Jiang Wang was confident that he could defeat him in a one-on-one fight. As the leader of the Yellow River, he didn't say anything in this situation. He raised his sword and charged forward. He turned the corner as fast as lightning. His field of vision suddenly opened up. In front of Huan Tao's tall figure, a fat figure, a thin figure, and a graceful figure all turn around. Zheng Fei, Li Shou, and Yin Zi. The two sides looked at each other, stunned. Only then did Huan Tao turn around. He saw Jiang Wang with a long sword in his hand and an aggressive aura. It was obvious that he wanted to cut him down. Huan Tao couldn't help but grin. Inside the cave, the diviner and the blood demon were guarding Yu Beidu. They were also fighting against him. All three sides couldn't move. Yu Beidu was certainly powerful. However, going deep into the source of the blood demon and destroying the blood demon technique of emotionless and sensual severing took a lot of energy. He had to use all his wits and courage. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spared the diviner's life. He also wouldn't have left the diviner and the ghost head blade on his head. The bloodstains on his face would also affect his image. It could be said that in this situation, all three sides were trying their best to hold on. If possible, all three sides wanted to get rid of this situation by force. However, everyone had their own plans, clashing with each other, and it was difficult for things to go as they wished, falling into this type of situation. At this moment, a little external force could very well break the balance. The blood demon's origin was the most terrifying, but in the modern world, he was the least of their worries because there were no external forces to speak of. There was a lack of variables. In such a state of entanglement, he could be firmly counted in the game. In fact, if not for the sudden appearance of the fortune teller, the disappearance of the blood demon technique of extinguishing emotion and severing lust for at least 1,000 years was almost a foregone conclusion. However, the fortune teller and Yu Beidu were different. At this moment, the fortune teller placed his hopes on the 4 powerful demonic humans he had brought with him, while Yu Beidu placed all his bets on Jiang Wang. To Yu Beidu, Jiang Wang's battle record of killing 4 cultivators from the outer tower of transcendent powers of Jin country was not a secret. He had enough reason to believe that in a one-on-one fight, Jiang Wang could kill any of the exterior-level devilmen, and the innate chaos dispersal formation in the Valley of Rocks could create such conditions. This was a backup plan that he had set up long ago. But the fortune teller smiled. Jiang Wang has already become the heaven's sanctum? Is that why you have such confidence? He asked. Since ancient times, the greatest battle record of an inner sanctum cultivator was when the old man of the heaven's sanctum defeated 3 famous exterior-level powerhouses and became an immortal legend. None of the 4 demonic humans I brought with me lost to the old man of the heaven's sanctum. Do you think Jiang Wang can create a new legend? Yu Beidu frowned. What do you mean? What do I mean? The fortune teller laughed heartily, laughing that he had finally won a step. You're not the only one who knows the innate chaos dispersal formation, and you're not the only one who set up the formation in the Valley of Rocks. Your karma thread should be broken. Outside the broken soul gorge, Lin Xian walked out of the gorge in a daze. After leaving the tall and steep cliffs on both sides, the scorching sunlight poured down in torrents, covering his entire body with heat and also stinging his eyes. After practicing the blade for so many years and working so hard, what had happened? Could it be that there were some things that were impossible? Just like Rongguo Chi, just like himself to Jiang Wang, was hard work just to make people more desperate? Lin Xian raised his head and looked directly at the sun, feeling the pain that the scorching sun brought to his eyes. The pain made him sober, but also made him struggle. Should he lower his head and walk forward, or continue to look at the sun? Every muscle was filled with power. Lin Xian could still feel his control over his body. He could feel his own strength, but his steps were no longer firm. Suddenly, he gritted his teeth, picked up the hatchet, and ran back into the gorge. Out of some inexplicable feeling, he wanted to see the leader of the Yellow River again. He wanted to know why the peerless Tianjiao, named Jiang Wang, came to the Broken Soul Gorge. He wanted to see him again. Even if the sun was out of his reach, he wanted to know how far away he was. In the innate chaos dispersal formation that had been activated, the 5 people who suddenly met looked at each other. Huan Tao grinned first. This grin on his tough temperament looked quite funny and out of place. However, he had just been defeated by the opponent with a single sword strike not long ago. Now, he came back with a group of powerhouses to take revenge. 4 against 1. This was really unethical. Bah! He couldn't help but feel happy. However, Zheng Fei was even happier than him. The fat man held the hatchet in one hand, and his face was full of surprise. "Little Jiang, are you here to play with me?" When he spoke excitedly, he picked up the hatchet and hacked at the strange rock next to him. Sparks flew everywhere. It was hard for others to understand his definition of play. Of course, Skinny Lee could understand, but he had a different opinion. He said in a low voice, "Maybe he's here to play with me." Zheng Fei glared at him fiercely. He curled his lips. "He's here to play with us." Yinzi ignored these 2 clowns. She only looked at Jiang Wang coldly and laughed coldly. What a coincidence, young man. She was wondering why the formation was activated so soon after she and Huan Tao retreated into the valley of messy rocks. After a while, Zheng Laosan and Li Laosi were also thrown in. They were supposed to be scattered in the formation, but the 4 of them were inexplicably squeezed together in a daze, which annoyed her. Now it seemed that this was the arrangement of the diviner. The diviner was really good at calculating. Out of the 5 people, 4 of them were in a good mood. Unfortunately, Jiang Wang was the only one who was in a bad mood. He looked at the 4 demonic humans facing him and didn't know what to say for a moment. He couldn't help but take a look at the money. If he understood it correctly, the so-called "take me to kill them one by one" should mean that after killing one, he would go to the next one, and not one of them together, right? What was the situation now? Leading the way into the wolf's den? Would they agree to a one-on-one fight? He didn't know if the resentment in his eyes was too strong, but when he looked over and wanted to ask for an explanation, he saw the money flying in the air suddenly fall straight to the ground, and there was no more reaction. Jiang Wang was speechless. Was this the legendary act of playing dead? What the F***CK is this? If he could start over and go back to Lindsay Street, he only wanted to say 3 words to Yin Zhao when he saw the old man lying on the ground. Crash into him. But at this moment, he could only hold his sword tightly. He crashed into them himself. He was facing 4 outer-building demonic humans with terrifying strength and various supernatural powers. Turning around was tantamount to giving up this round. It meant that he was handing over his life to them to decide. He was betting on whether they would be soft-hearted, whether they would fail, and whether they would be merciful. Jiang Wang sometimes gambled, but he never gambled on these things. He only gambled on whether he could control his own fate. He only gambled on whether his sword could kill his opponents before he died. Even the old man of Heaven's Mansion, who had left behind an immortal record, didn't face such a situation. The 4 demonic humans were all infamous for their ferocity. They were even worse than the Yama Kings of the newly established forces like the Gateless Hell. So should he give up? Because the limit had already been set? Because even the old man of Heaven's Mansion, who was regarded as the strongest in the inner mansion since ancient times, had never challenged such an opponent. So this was destined to be a hopeless matter? No. Limits were always written by people. If the old man of Heaven's mansion could do it, why couldn't Jiang Wang? Ever since he started cultivating, he had never slacked off. Every time he encountered life and death, he never gave up. Could it be that he wanted to stand behind the limit set by his predecessors and say that he was in awe of a high mountain? He charged forward. The 5 inner mansions opened at the same time. The light of 5 magical powers shone inside and outside. It made him look like an immortal god, and his sword was like a swimming dragon. The 5 mansion sea in his body calmed down. The heaven and earth island remained motionless. The cloud palace was hidden in the clouds. Only a sword immortal in a green robe and holding a sword stood high above the 5 mansion sea. An immortal red heart magical power leaped out and jumped into the sword immortal's body. Bang bang. Brilliant light flashed, and the world recovered. Waves appeared in the blue sea, and the clouds opened for thousands of miles. The other 3 inner mansions shook at the same time and crashed into him. Lips parted and ears stood, and the immortal opened his eyes. No one had ever seen Jiang Wang at this moment. No one had ever been lucky enough to see such a scene. Everyone knew that Jiang Wang was the number 1 in the inner mansion. However, no one knew how strong Jiang Wang had become after he defeated the Emperor of Hell at the viewing river platform. The moment the sword immortal opened his eyes, Chang Xiangxi was already howling. Jiang Wang attacked with his sword, as if he had grasped the eternal truth of the world. At this moment, he felt an unprecedented version of himself. He was unprecedentedly strong, unprecedentedly vast. Surging power flowed through every corner of his body. He vaguely felt that his sword could split open the sky and split the earth. He could settle all worldly matters with a single sword strike. Who could resist him? Thus, a sword went straight and a step forward. A pool of autumn water covered his vision. A stream of light connected the sky and the earth. This sword that supported the heaven and earth was called Man. The word man split in 2, facing Huan Tao and the 3 demons behind Huan Tao. In Yanzi's eyes, she only saw a young man in the inner mansion realm. Facing the 4 infamous outer building realm human devils, Meng Qi and Qi Xiaoqiu were extremely powerful. He did not hesitate at all and directly pulled out his sword and charged forward. His sword was like a ray of dawn, and it made people feel like they had seen a ray of light in a long night. His eyes were so calm, and there was no determination to die, no intense anger. But it was precisely because of this that they could see his determination. He shattered the green clouds with 1 step, and a frosty white cloak spread out behind him. Crimson-red flames flowed around his body. At his torso, 5 balls of blazing white light represented an unparalleled power. That was the light of the divine palace, the highest achievement of the inner mansion realm. His eyes were faintly glowing with a crimson gold, and there was a hint of immortality. He did not hesitate to charge forward with his sword. This sword seemed to be able to split the heavens and the earth. What was the unparalleled Tianjiao? At this moment, a concrete image of this phrase appeared in Yanzi's mind. It made her daze for a moment, and she remembered the high-spirited young man from before. Many years ago, she also looked at him in a daze like this clang. As the person who faced this sword head-on, beheading Demon Huan, Tao did not have the time to be dazed. That terrifying aura rushed over like a tsunami. There were clearly people behind him, and they were all experts among experts, but he was like a lone boat floating against the tide. He could not hold back. This was the most direct thought in his mind. From the middle of his chest, a dark green, ferocious ghost claw with twisted blood vessels stretched out. His 5 fingers spread out and pressed against his chest. It was as if a flower of evil spirits had bloomed on his chest. The 5 ferocious fingers that formed the flower petals extended crazily, like vines, and instantly covered his entire body. Then, with the sounds of crack, crack, amidst the sound of bones rubbing against each other, Hung Tao, who was already very strong, continued to expand, his eyes bulged outwards, and the veins on his forehead were densely packed like snakes. 3 pairs of vertebrae even protruded from his back, bending forward like a bone armor, protecting him. Finally, he extended his fangs and transformed into a giant ghost with a height of more than 20 feet. His body was surrounded by ghost energy, and his eyes were filled with greed. Divine ability, extreme, evil, hungry ghost body. Why did he, who was usually very polite as a mechanic engineer, become a beheading demon Huan Tao? Because in this state, he fed on skulls. The heavy sword in his hand also changed at this moment. Crack, crack, crack sound could be heard. The heavy sword that looked like an iron rod extended outwards, and the tip of the sword extended outwards. It continued to expand, and finally expanded into a huge sword that was more than 10 feet long, and was held in the hands of the extreme, evil, hungry ghost. The 4-star towers in the distant sky lit up, and the light of the sacred towers bathed the ghost body, strengthening it, and also allowing him to maintain his intelligence and consciousness. A long time ago, during a sect mission, when he encountered danger, he awakened the extreme, evil, hungry ghost body and brazenly killed the enemy to escape from danger. But he, who was fascinated by the divine ability, also ate his fellow sect members. If he did not awaken the extreme, evil, hungry ghost body, his fellow sect members would have died too. Therefore, the people he ate were people who were already dead. How could he be sentenced to death? How unfair was this? He begged for a chance, and swore to defeat the desire brought by the extreme, evil, hungry ghost body. He was even willing to let others destroy this divine ability and stop his path of cultivation. But even this chance could not be obtained. Everyone, including his family and friends, requested for him to be executed. He would always remember that the date of execution was set to be the 9th of the 3rd month. He would always remember the feeling of suffering, counting the days until his death approached. How terrifying it was. He broke down more than 10 times. Later on, every 9th of the 3rd month, he would have to kill a few people before he could calm down. Back then, there was internal strife in the sect, and the prisoners locked in the lowest level broke out of prison and escaped. He also followed in the chaos and escaped from the prison, and from then on, he left Ma's sect. As time passed, his cultivation improved, and he slowly became able to control this divine ability, but he was no longer willing to restrain himself. After all, the head was really delicious at this moment. He looked at the powerful opponent who was charging at him with a sword and felt the incomparably fresh and brilliant aura. Hunger and greed made him unable to speak. Roar, roar. He could only express himself like this. Holding the sword in his hand, he slashed out arc after arc of light. Ma's sect's secret technique, the 19-arc style, specially made for puppet warriors. What did it mean when combined with the extreme, evil, hungry ghost body? In Huan Tao's memory, it only meant terrifying and powerful. Among the 9 great demons, other than the diviner and boss, no one could ignore him in this state. How could this ant in front of him be an exception? Dense and violent arcs of light came straight at him, and Jiang Wang, who had 5 prefectures shining at the same time, only used the human sword to advance. Since ancient times, in the face of danger, in the face of disaster, and in the face of countless calamities and tribulations, the word human was only to move forward. It was so simple, yet so determined. So courageous, so persistent. Humans had 2 legs intertwined in front and back. Then they would move forward to the highest point, to the end of the sky. The majestic arcs of light came slashing one after another, but they were shattered one after another. This was a clash of pure strength, a clash of forces, a clash of intents. Jiang Wang moved forward, and the extreme, evil-hungry ghost fell back. Even Huan Tao, in his extreme fiend hungry ghost form, could not block this attack. But Huan Tao was not alone. Jiang Wang had never faced just one opponent. Let me. Come and play with me. A fat figure nimbly moved in front of the extreme, evil hungry ghost. He opened his arms wide, as if he wanted to hug Jiang Wang, but he did not defend himself. The 10,000 evil demonic man, using his divine ability to repay evil, welcomed the sword with his body. The unmasked demonic swallow also leaped high from behind the extreme, evil-hungry ghost. She opened her arms, and a ferocious red-eyed swallow looked down from behind her, casting a huge shadow. Chapter 13:16. Lin Xian carried the hatchet in his hand, walking cautiously. He walked and watched. This was the first scene he saw when he arrived at the Valley of Rocks from the entrance of the Broken Soul Gorge. For someone like him who possessed the unfettered divine art, no formation could imprison him. The world was vast, and he was unrestrained. He could move freely even in the Khanate Chaos Separation Formation. Of course, he knew about the notorious reputation of the 9 Great Devils. All evil, cut meat, unmasked, and beheader. These 4 demons all had blood debts. Countless people in the world wanted to kill demons, but they couldn't find them. Those who did find them were usually silent. He knew that if he faced any one of them, he could only think of ways to escape. He was also a Tianjiao who could participate in the gathering of the Yellow River. Because of the existence of the ability, it was common for an inner house cultivator to challenge an outer house cultivator. But these were the 4 demons. They were true outer house cultivators, not existences that could be easily surpassed. At least he, who had the hopes of the entire realm, couldn't. However, facing these 4 demons, Jiang Wang was right in front of him. He took the initiative to draw his sword and charge into the formation. His momentum was like a hungry tiger pouncing on a flock of sheep, as if he had nothing to worry about. These were demons. Then he saw Jiang Wang's 5 prefectures light up, showing the gorgeous appearance of a sword immortal, and displaying the incomparably brilliant power of the divine palace. He was stunned. He had tried his best to imagine the gap between him and Jiang Wang, but today's scene told him that his imagination wasn't enough to fill the gap. He saw the beheader devilman's ferocious and terrifying body of the extreme, evil-hungry ghost and felt the pure evil in power. He only felt that it was incomparably terrifying and difficult to resist. Then he saw the unmasked devilman's power explode, and the terrifying shadow cast by the red-eyed swallow made his soul tremble. Could an outer house cultivator be so strong? Could an inner house cultivator be so strong? Ever since he attained the unfettered ability, he was trained by Rong Ting as a trump card. Although he was a man of few words, he was proud. He thought that after attaining the unfettered ability, he could establish himself in the world with just a hatchet. But now, the battle in front of him almost refreshed his understanding of the level of power. He felt that no matter which side he joined, it would be hard for him to survive. Especially Jiang Wang. He had yet to reach the level of the outer tower, so his knowledge was not deep enough. However, he was currently in the inner palace realm, so he didn't know that inner palace realm cultivators could be so powerful. Was this the strength of the Yellow River's leader? The scene before him made him realize how narrow-minded he had been all along. It was as if he had been in the Broken Soul Gorge for a long time and could only see a sliver of the sky. In this Khanate chaos array, Lin Xian felt an unprecedented sense of loss. He did not know what was ahead, nor did he know what was behind him. The hand holding the saber was ice cold. Jiang Wang didn't know that someone had come to watch the fight because of the Khanate chaos formation. He threw himself into this unprecedentedly difficult battle. He wanted to challenge the legend. However, the fat man who suddenly bumped into him was the first obstacle that was difficult to overcome. He casually picked up a cloak, and thus came into contact with Fatty Zheng and Skinny Li. He had been blackmailed by this fat man before, and he had also hung this fat man up before. At that time, Fatty Zheng and Skinny Li had happily allowed him to tie them up. Now that he thought about it, they were just playing around. Demonic humans had childlike innocence. They were even more evil than ordinary villains. They did whatever they wanted and did whatever they wanted. They knew that what they were doing was evil, but this evil was only an evaluation of their actions based on the secular standards. They didn't feel anything bad about their actions. As long as it was something that could make them happy, they were willing to do anything. Therefore, they could play the game of blackmail with Jiang Wang, and they could also watch how Jiang Wang dealt with them with a smile. They could even cook and kill all the cultivators in the Azure Cloud Pavilion without any scruples. But right now, the more important thing was that Jiang Wang had personally witnessed the strangeness of this fat man's supernatural power at the Azure Cloud Pavilion in the Yong country. Before he figured out the supernatural power, he knew that he couldn't let his sword fall. Even Fatty Zheng, who was wide open, seemed to be too easy to kill with one strike. Because of the existence of the evil retribution supernatural power, he might be the one to die after the sword fell. Jiang Wang's brilliant sword came to this point. While he was in the air, the sword light suddenly converged and hid behind his back. Such a majestic sword was quietly put away by him. Such exquisite control was impossible for only a top swordsman. He crashed into Fatty Zheng, as if he wanted to have a tough collision. But before Fatty could wrap his arms around Jiang Wang, he tapped the void with his feet, and the azure cloud mark appeared and disappeared. Taking advantage of this, he flew into the air, away from Fatty Zheng, and faced the unmasked devil man. The red-eyed giant swallow flapped its wings and flew over. Jiang Wang hid his sword behind his back like a scholar, facing it head-on with his hands behind his back. The blue-robed man flew alone in the air. When his eyes shone, he had already summoned the five senses hell and landed on the unmasked devilman's body. The five senses hell couldn't see, the ear hell couldn't hear, the nose hell couldn't smell, the tongue hell couldn't eat, the body hell couldn't feel, and the death hell couldn't feel. This was a secret technique passed down from the Chi's treasury. It was a genuine outer-building Taoist art of the spirit. Only cultivators like Jiang Wang, whose spirit far exceeded those in the same realm, could master it in the inner mansion realm. It was suitable for use in a battle at the outer building level. Could Jiang Wang kill the unmasked devil man the moment his five senses hell was sealed? Before this question even began, the answer was already in sight. Jiang Wang, who had summoned the five senses hell, even ignored the red-eyed giant swallow. He faced the unmasked devil man in an extremely cold and fierce manner. Was he going to exchange injury for injury, risking his life to fight? But an arc of light leaped up, as if drawing a natural moat. Huan Tao, who had revealed his extreme, evil-hungry ghost body, had already recovered. Once again, he slashed out 19 arcs to block Jiang Wang's front, wanting to end this adventure. Not only that, with this block, the red-eyed giant swallow had already arrived. It directly landed on Jiang Wang's body and plunged into his body. This red-eyed giant swallow was not a physical object, and it didn't have claws or teeth. It was also a spirit-killing art. Jiang Wang's Tongtian Palace suddenly turned blood-red. Looking around, it was as if he had fallen into a sea of blood. His position was missing, and he didn't know where he was or where he was. He was dizzy and couldn't control himself, but there was half a scroll that floated in the middle. The scroll shook slightly, and the endless blood red was absorbed into the scroll, revealing every detail. It was the formation-breaking single rider painting from North Xiang. The figure of the green-robed man with a single sword was also reflected on this painting. Then, the green-robed sword immortal strode forward. With a slash of his sword, the red-eyed giant swallow's head was directly separated from its body. The blood red that filled the sky dissipated as if it had never arrived. Everything that happened on the soul level was complicated to describe, but it happened and ended in the blink of an eye in the real world. When the swallow saw the red-eyed giant swallow plunge down, and Jiang Wang's eyes were filled with confusion, it immediately floated over. It casually pulled out a cold short sword, and in a flash, it was already close. It coldly hollered, "Help me kill his soul." Zheng Fei, who was originally chasing Jiang Wang, held his machete and rose into the air, whistling through the air. Skinny Li, who had been waiting for a chance, also floated over like a ghost. He quietly stretched out his claws, reaching for the back of Jiang Wang's neck. "Don't!" The one who shouted this was Huan Tao. This was because when his 19 arc forms cut into Jiang Wang's aura, what he felt was not chaos, but a dense and endless counterattack. The aura was not scattered, and the aura was not chaotic. Thus, he knew that Jiang Wang was not bewitched, and understood that Jiang Wang's current state was only a temporary trap. Thus, he immediately warned. It had to be said that in this battle, his grasp of the opportunity was clearly above the other human demons. It was unknown whether it was the 19 arc form's credit or that compared to the other 3 human demons, he paid more attention to battle techniques. Hearing the warning, Skinny Lee was the first to float away. Zhang Fei was the opposite. Not only did he not retreat, but he came even faster. However, Yin Zi, who should have also fled, did not seem to have heard anything. Still holding her short sword, her figure flickered, and she had already arrived in front of Jiang Wang. This was indeed a trap. However, this trap was not as simple as what Huan Tao saw. Jiang Wang pretending that his spirit was bewitched was only one of the steps. Previously, when facing the unmasked human demon, he chose to summon the 5 senses hell, showing his intention to kill. However, although the 5 senses hell was strong, he did not have the confidence to completely seal off the unmasked human demon's 5 senses. The 9 human demons were not ordinary powerhouses. It was hard to say what else they could rely on. Fighting against them, he could not be too optimistic. Thus, although Jiang Wang summoned the 5 senses hell, he focused on different things. The core was actually only the ear hell. The other 4 senses hell were just a bluff. The reason why he used the ear hell as the core was that his control of the Tao of sound far surpassed the other 4 senses. When the 5 senses hell was summoned, he activated the immortal sound state. On the spiritual level, he used the 5 senses hell to suppress, and on the external level, he used the 10,000 sounds to come, combining the inside and outside. The imprint of spirit and body, the unmasked human demon's hearing was actually under his control. What the unmasked human demon could hear and what Jiang Wang could not hear depended on what kind of sounds he used to come. In order to avoid Swallow's prematurely detection, Jiang Wang did not interfere with most of the sounds. He only changed the key points. For example, the Swallow had missed the warning from the beheading devilman Huan Tao. She instantly dispersed the feeling of her 5 senses being bewildered. She was completely unaware that her hearing had been controlled by her opponent. Therefore, when she suddenly pounced with her short sword, what welcomed her was Jiang Wang, whose eyes suddenly became clear, and the fire world where flame sparrows flew and flame meteors streaked across. The Starfire secret treasure opened. The fire world descended. The resplendent and gorgeous fire world temporarily blocked Zhang Fei. Huan Tao was also unable to approach, and Skinny Lee was even further away. Thus, it temporarily created a space where only Jiang Wang and Swallow were confronting each other. At this point, Jiang Wang's intentions were very obvious. He wanted to kill the unmasked human demon in the shortest time possible. What was he relying on? Why was he so confident? Under the faceless mask, Swallow's eyes showed a moment of panic. However, at this moment, Huan Tao, who had revealed his extreme, evil, hungry ghost body and was over 20 feet tall, suddenly opened his huge mouth with sharp teeth. Roar! He suddenly inhaled, and a terrifying hurricane formed and poured into his huge mouth. Flame sparrows, flame meteors, and flame flowers were all sucked into his huge mouth. He actually swallowed the fire world into his stomach. His huge mouth was full of bloody blisters, and there was a faint smell of meat on his body. His throat was even smoking. However, he had swallowed Jiang Wang's fire world after all. The extreme, evil, hungry ghost body was so terrifying. Swallow's figure flashed, and she had already fled behind Zhang Fei. The opportunity to kill the unmasked human demon was lost. Swallow's figure flashed, and her heart was filled with fear. Although there was only a short moment of alone time between her and Jiang Wang didn't even have time to act. Huan Tao had decisively swallowed the fire world. However, she still felt lingering fear. Then she was shocked. Why did she, who was extremely fierce in the outer tower, lose the courage to face Jiang Wang alone for a moment? In that short moment just now, she actually thought she would die. Was it when Jiang Wang knocked back both her and Huan Tao at the same time before returning to the valley that she was scared out of her wits? Or was it when Jiang Wang took the initiative to attack while fighting 1 against 4 in the innate maze, making her secretly afraid? Of course, the most realistic fear was that her hearing was unknowingly controlled by her opponent. When the 5 hells fell, she easily broke through, but she didn't expect to lose her voice unknowingly. What would happen if she turned a deaf ear? The 4 human demons' natural cooperation would be disrupted by Jiang Wang under the change of his voice. The dangerous situation just now was a clear proof. He can control our hearing. Swallow reminded as soon as she reacted. Flesh human demon Li Shou, who was floating very far away, immediately turned around and slashed his right ear with 2 fingers. With 2 fingers together, he slashed half of his ear, and blood dripped. Jiang Wang, who was in the air, also had his right ear split open, and blood flew out. His ear wasn't completely cut off, but his immortal state had collapsed and couldn't be maintained. The 4 human demons naturally had their own methods, and they were extremely terrifying. But the first thought that came to Jiang Wang's mind was, Li Shou's supernatural power performance this time was different from the time at the Azure Cloud Pavilion. He remembered very clearly that at that time, Li Shou drew his sword and cut his own neck. The blade only cut half of his neck, and the head of the Azure Cloud Pavilion sect master had already separated from his body. That kind of strange supernatural power effect and horrifying performance made people's hands and feet go cold, and they completely didn't know how to deal with it. Also because of that scene, in today's battle, the one he was most wary of was actually Li Shou, who fought with him the least. Because he didn't understand the Tong Gui supernatural power and didn't know what conditions were needed to activate it. He tried his best not to come into contact with Li Shou unless he was certain that he could kill him. In this battle, on one hand, he tried his best to avoid Li Shou. On the other hand, he was looking for a chance to kill him. However, although Li Shou was usually Zhang Fei's follower and looked crazy, he was extremely vigilant in battle. He attacked the slowest and retreated the fastest, leaving no chance for Zhang Fei. From the beginning until now, the 2 of them hadn't properly clashed even once. And just now, Li Shou almost cut his own ear in half. The effect of the Tong Gui supernatural power was transmitted, but Jiang Wang's ear only had a bloody wound and was bleeding. Did Li Shou need more time to prepare for his Tong Gui supernatural power? Or were there other conditions that had not been met? In any case, the Tong Gui supernatural power couldn't be unlimited. This was good news. Jiang Wang wasn't bothered by the pain at all. In the battle, he only focused on looking for the possibility of victory. In the collapsing, magnificent fire world, at this moment when the immortal state of sound was broken and the unmasked devil man had recovered his hearing, he suddenly turned around, stepped on the green clouds, and went straight for Li Shou. Everyone could see that he wanted to get rid of the terrifying Tong Gui supernatural power first. After all, any supernatural power and any Dao technique had the possibility to deal with it. However, the Tong Gui supernatural power was activated by the user of the supernatural power. You could prevent yourself from being hurt, but you couldn't prevent others from hurting you. Skinny Lee chuckled as he retreated. It seemed like he was very pleased with himself for angering this toy. However, Jiang Wang, who was chasing relentlessly, had a calm look in his eyes. As he flew, he suddenly turned his head and scolded Zhang Fei, who was coming with a knife. "If you don't want to die, get away, you fat pig." Of course, he didn't want to scold Zhang Fei to death, but at this moment, he triggered the fury of the Dao technique. Zhang Fei's eyes suddenly widened, as if he didn't expect that the toy he approved of so much would scold him like this. His anger boiled, his chest rose and fell rapidly, and his big hand clenched the machete so tightly that it creaked. His whole body seemed to have swelled due to congestion, and he looked even fatter. However, his speed was even faster. His body broke through the air, and a fierce explosion sounded. In just a flash, he had already caught up to Jiang Wang and slashed at his head. Jiang Wang elegantly dodged to the side and kicked straight. He concentrated his Dao energy, and it had the power to collapse a mountain. Zhang Fei didn't have time to retract his machete, and he didn't intend to do so. He directly exposed his vital point and met the attack with his abdomen. With the evil retribution's supernatural power, his vital point was the enemy's vital point. However, when this kick landed, it was light as a feather. Jiang Wang kicked Zhang Fei's abdomen, and the soles of his boots sunk half an inch into the fatty abdomen. Then, the blue cloud mark flashed, and his whole body bounced back at a terrifying speed, away from Zhang Fei, and straight toward the mask unveiling Devilman. His target was still Yanzi. He opened his mouth and blew, and a frosty white wind floated in the air. It instantly turned into lethal nails, and cold light circulated. A total of 3 sharp nails flew toward the mask unveiling Devilman in a triangular formation. In a flash, they were already in front of her. Yanzi was terrified. She didn't expect that Jiang Wang's killing intent towards her would be so strong. He looked for her whenever he had the chance, and even created one when he didn't have the chance. She didn't provoke Jiang Wang for this. The faceless mask on her face suddenly seemed to have water ripples flowing through it. Clear facial features had already appeared on it. Thick eyebrows, wide nose, and thick lips. This was an unfamiliar, manly face. Lin Xian, who had been hiding on the side and watching the battle under the cover of the Khanate Chaos Separation Formation, narrowed his eyes. He seemed to recognize this face. It was a former outer sect expert of the Rong Kingdom. He had been missing for many years without any news. He had only seen a portrait in a friend's house. Now, it appeared on the mask unveiling Devilman's head. Just thinking about the reason was enough to make one shudder. As soon as Yanzi's face appeared, an unusually strong wall had already been erected in front of her. It extended in all directions, as if it had no end, and was indestructible. Supernatural power, Iron Wall. Jiang Wang had already seen this supernatural power. He had broken it with his own hands on the Riverview platform. After Yanzi changed her face, the iron wall displayed by the outer sect's cultivation base was slightly different from Qin Jizhen's. The development of supernatural powers varied from person to person, and there was nothing strange about it. However, in Jiang Wang's eyes, this iron wall was really not as good as Qin Jizhen's. Qin Jizhen's iron wall was more genuine and sturdier. However, Jiang Wang did not intend to reenact the scene of the killing nail breaking the iron wall on the Riverview platform. In fact, if Yanzi could calm down a little, she should be able to detect that although Jiang Wang seemed to be targeting her, the killing power he poured in was far from the limit. Therefore, this was still only a feint. Yanzi had already made the wrong choice due to fear and was determined to go astray. After Jiang Wang blew away the Buzhou wind and drew out the iron wall, he nimbly turned around and crashed into Huantao. After forcing Skinny Li to retreat, infuriating Zhang Fei, and intimidating Yanzi, Jiang Wang's true target was still this beheader Devilman. No matter which angle one looked at it from, at this moment, none of the 4 human demons in this innate maze were easy to deal with. Even if any of the human demons seized the opportunity, they would have the ability to quickly kill Jiang Wang. Compared to the 4 human demons, the 4 outer sect cultivators of the exorcist army that they encountered outside the Yun Kingdom's borders were like children and adults. Any one of the latter had the strength to face the 4 of them alone. Any 2 of them working together could kill them. If it weren't so difficult, how could the Battle of the Elder of the Heavenly Mansion that year become an eternal legend? Jiang Wang wanted to quickly finish off an opponent several times, but they were all quickly resolved. The human sword was forced to stop, the fire world was swallowed, and the immortal state was broken. This kind of battle was really hopeless. However, it wasn't true that they didn't have weaknesses. In other words, they probably didn't have any at the beginning, but they did now. The weakness appeared at the moment when the mask-unveiling human demon was in danger. In order to save her, the beheader devil man opened his mouth and swallowed the fire world with his extreme, evil-hungry ghost body. However, this fire world, was it so easy to swallow? This kind of powerful Tao technique that was close to the transcendent grade had been sublimated when they fought against Zhao Xianyang in the Zhongshan kingdom. Even with the extreme, evil-hungry ghost body, swallowing it would cause diarrhea. The bloody blisters on Huan Tao's mouth and the green smoke in his throat were clear evidence. Jiang Wang only glanced at Huan Tao before chasing after Skinny Li and harassing Zheng Fei. He made everyone think that he was going to kill Yin Zi, but he never neglected Huan Tao's state. Every detail of the battle was in Jiang Wang's mind. Drops of water gathered in a stream, flowing calmly and steadily. We turned around in front of the iron wall and suddenly faced Huan Tao. Huan Tao was still digesting the fire world. Suddenly, Huan Tao saw Jiang Wang's left eye as red as fire, and at the level of his spirit, a brilliant sun descended. The eye of Qianyang attacked the spirit with falling west. He had to endure the physical pain and actively deal with the battle at the level of the spirit. However, the battle of the spirit was just a casual move. Jiang Wang's real trump card was behind him. The hand holding the sword that he had been holding behind his back suddenly appeared in front of him. A brilliant sword light shone like a stream that illuminated the sun. This was the sword that he had been forced to hide behind his back when he was blocked by Zheng Fei in the beginning. Everyone thought that the sword had dissipated. However, he had actually hidden the surging torrent-like human sword. He had forcefully suppressed all the boiling momentum and power, only revealing it at this moment. No one expected this sword. This sword was earth-shattering. When the sword immortal with 5 prefectures landed, it was like a sword that flew from the heavens. In a hurry, there was no way to escape. Huan Tao could only use the extreme fiend-hungry ghost to mobilize his strength and control 2 intersecting sword arcs. He faced it head-on with the 19 arcs, risking his life to determine life and death. The sword arcs were so dazzling. They crossed diagonally, as if they were blocking the heavens and earth, preventing the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning from entering. However, the human sword was divided into 2 parts. The 2 sword auras seemed to support the heavens and earth, condensing into eternity in an instant. The sword arcs were defeated, and the heavy sword was deflected. Jiang Wang and his sword pierced through the heart of the ferocious extreme, fiend-hungry ghost. Black hair and green clothes, he passed through the green-black blood rain. When the ferocious ghost fell, only Jiang Wang's white cloak fluttered in the air. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.